On her wedding night, a young woman was accused of greed by the most powerful duke in the realm and exiled to die in the frozen wilderness. But instead of breaking, she did something no one expected. What happened next shook the entire kingdom. Stay until the end to see how a woman with nothing became unstoppable. Drop a like and comment which city you're watching from. The candles had barely stopped smoking when Rowan Hale told his new wife to get out. Lydia stood in the center of the grand hall, still wearing her wedding gown, ivory silk that had taken 3 seamstresses a month to finish. The hem was already dirty from the chapel floor. Her hands were cold. She'd been cold all day, actually, ever since the vows. Ever since she'd looked into her husband's eyes and seen nothing but ice. "You will leave tonight," Rowan said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The Duke of Hale didn't shout. He simply spoke, and the world rearranged itself to obey. Lydia's breath caught, but she didn't move. Around them, servants pretended not to listen, while absolutely listening. The fire crackled. Someone coughed. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "Don't you?" Rowan stepped closer. He was tall. She'd noticed that during the ceremony, but up close he seemed even larger. His jaw was hard, his mouth a slash of contempt. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" "Find out what?" "About your father's debts. About why you really agreed to this marriage." Lydia's stomach dropped. She forced herself to meet his gaze. "My father's debts are real. I never hid them." "No, you just failed to mention how deep they went, or that your family planned to bleed my coffers dry the moment the ink dried on our contract. That's not— I have the letters." His voice could have frozen wine. "Correspondence between your father and his creditors. Plans to petition me for loans that would never be repaid. Instructions on how you should persuade me." He said the last word like it tasted rotten. Heat flooded Lydia's face. Those weren't my plans. I didn't even know." "Enough!" Rowan turned away from her, addressing the room. "A carriage will take you to the northern cottage on my lands. You'll have basic provisions. A servant will check on you weekly. Beyond that, you're on your own." The northern cottage. Lydia had heard the maids whispering about it. It was 4 hours from the estate, deep in the wild lands where the Duke's territory met the untamed frontier. No one lived out there. No one wanted to. "You're exiling me," she said. Her voice came out steady. She was proud of that. Rowan looked back at her. For a moment, just a flash, something complicated crossed his face. Then it was gone, replaced by cold certainty. "I'm removing a threat," he said. "Be grateful I'm not doing worse." The carriage rattled north through the night. Lydia sat alone in the dark, her wedding dress a ghost-white pool around her feet. The driver hadn't spoken to her. The single servant who'd loaded her 2 trunks, all she'd been allowed to take, had avoided her eyes. She pressed her forehead against the cold window and watched the estate disappear behind the hills. Her father had done this. The realization settled over her like stones in deep water. He'd written those letters, made those plans, and never told her. He'd sent her into this marriage with a target on her back and a smile on his face. "For the family," he'd said the night before the wedding. He'd gripped her hands too tight, his eyes too bright. "You're saving us, Lydia. You're going to save us all." She'd thought he meant she was marrying well, that the Duke's name and protection would shield them from their creditors. She hadn't known she was supposed to be a con. The worst part, the part that made her chest ache, was that she'd been ready to try, ready to make this marriage work. She'd studied Rowan Hale for weeks before the wedding, learned that he'd inherited the duchy at 19 when his father died, that he'd spent the last 8 years dragging his lands from near bankruptcy to prosperity, that he was known as fair but ruthless, brilliant but cold. She'd thought, I can work with cold. Cold is better than cruel. She'd been wrong about which one he was. The cottage appeared just before dawn. It wasn't what Lydia expected. She'd imagined something small but serviceable, a hunting lodge maybe, or a gamekeeper's house. This was a shepherd's hut that had given up. One room, stone walls, a roof that sagged in the middle like a broken promise. No glass in the windows, just shutters that hung crooked on leather hinges. A fireplace that looked like it hadn't been used in years. The driver dropped her trunks in the dirt and left without a word. Lydia stood in the pre-dawn gray and looked at her new home. Then she picked up the first trunk and carried it inside. What? The first week nearly killed her. Not metaphorically. Actually, nearly killed her. The provisions Rowan had promised turned out to be a sack of grain, some salt, a few candles, and a rusted pot. No firewood, no blankets beyond the one thin sheet someone had thrown over the cot, no tools except a dull knife that could barely cut bread. Lydia had grown up in a declining noble house, which meant she'd learned to do more for herself than most ladies. She could mend her own clothes, style her own hair, manage a household's accounts. She had no idea how to survive in the wilderness. The first night, she huddled on the cot in her wedding dress and shivered so hard her teeth clacked together. When dawn came, she was so cold she couldn't feel her feet. "You're going to die here," a voice in her head whispered. "He sent you here to die, and no one will even know." Lydia stood up. If she was going to die, she'd die doing something other than freezing. She tore the train off her wedding dress with the dull knife. The fabric, expensive silk that had cost more than some families earned in a year, made decent insulation when she stuffed it between the cracks in the walls. She used her petticoats to block the windows. Firewood. She needed firewood. The forest started about 50 yards from the cottage. Lydia had never been in a real forest before. Her family's estate had manicured gardens and a small decorative wood that was more park than wilderness. This forest was dark, ancient. The trees grew so close together she could barely see the sky. She went in anyway. Breaking branches off dead trees was harder than she'd thought. Her hands were soft, unused to rough work. Within an hour, she had blisters. By afternoon, the blisters had burst and her palms were bleeding. She gathered wood anyway. That night, she managed to start a fire using a method she half remembered from watching a servant years ago, striking the knife against a stone, catching sparks in dry moss. It took her 2 hours and most of her patience. When the flames finally caught, she sat in front of them and cried. Not from despair, from sheer bloody-minded satisfaction. She'd done it. She'd survived day one. The second week, she learned to cook grain without burning it. The third week, she found a stream and learned which plants growing beside it were edible. 2 days of stomach cramps taught her which ones weren't. The fourth week, she met her neighbors. She was hauling water from the stream when she heard voices. Children's voices, high and arguing. Lydia froze. She hadn't seen another person since the carriage driver abandoned her. 3 kids emerged from the trees. 2 boys and a girl, none older than 10. They stopped dead when they saw her. "You're the witch," the oldest boy said. Lydia blinked. "What?" "The Duke's witch. Ma said he sent you here because you tried to curse him." "I'm not a witch. What was she? Not the Duchess. She'd been that for less than a day. Not a wife. Not anything, really. I'm Lydia." The girl stepped forward. She had dirt on her face and her dress was patched in 6 places. "You live in the old cottage?" "Yes." "By yourself?" "Yes." All 3 children stared at her like she'd claimed to live on the moon. "Why?" the smaller boy asked. "Because your Duke is a bastard," Lydia thought. "It's complicated," she said. The girl considered this. Then, "Can you read?" "Of course." "Could you teach us?" That's how it started. The children, Mara, James, and little Tom, came back the next day with 2 more kids. Then 4 more. Within a week, Lydia had 9 students sitting in front of her cottage every afternoon, practicing their letters in the dirt with sticks. Their parents were frontier farmers, homesteaders who'd taken the Duke's offer of free land in exchange for working the wild edges of his territory. Hard people living hard lives. Most couldn't read. Most had never been more than 20 miles from where they were born. They were suspicious of Lydia at first. The Duke's cast-off wife, living alone, teaching their children. It didn't sit right. Then winter came early, and Tom's mother got sick. Lydia had been organizing her medical supplies, the few herbs and remedies she'd managed to gather from the forest, when Mara appeared at her door, white-faced and shaking. "Ma can't breathe right. She's burning up. Pa doesn't know what to do." Lydia grabbed her basket and followed. The farmhouse was 2 miles through the woods. Tom's mother was in bad shape. Fever, congested lungs, getting worse by the hour. His father stood helplessly beside the bed, big hands clenched into useless fists. "I'm not a physician," Lydia said quietly, "but I know some things. My mother was often ill. I learned." The man looked at her with desperate, distrustful eyes. Then he nodded. Lydia worked through the night. She made a steam tent using boiled water and pine needles to ease the woman's breathing, crushed willow bark for the fever, applied poultices to draw out the infection. By dawn, the fever had broken. Tom's father gripped Lydia's hand so hard her bones ached. "Thank you," he said, rough and quiet. "We won't forget this." Word spread. After that, the parents stopped looking at her like a threat. They started bringing her things: eggs, milk, a rabbit one of the boys had trapped. One woman taught her how to preserve vegetables. Another showed her how to reinforce her cottage roof before the snow came. Lydia didn't just survive. She began to build something. The children learned fast. They were hungry for it, for the idea that there was more to the world than the small patch of it they could see. Lydia taught them reading, writing, basic arithmetic. She told them stories about history and geography and science. She taught them that knowledge was a kind of power, and slowly, week by week, she became part of their community. Not the Duke's wife, not a lady, just Lydia, who lived in the cottage and taught their children and delivered babies when the midwife was too far away and sat with the dying when there was nothing else to be done. She became necessary. No. Rowan Hale told himself he wasn't checking on her. He was inspecting his northern territories. He did it twice a year. It was good management, making sure his lands were being worked properly, that his people had what they needed. The fact that his route now took him past a certain cottage was coincidence. He sat on his horse at the tree line and watched her. It had been 3 months. He'd expected what? That she'd be gone? That she'd have fled back to her father, or died of exposure, or something. He hadn't let himself think too hard about what might happen to a noblewoman alone in the wilderness. But there she was. She was teaching. A cluster of children sat in front of her cottage, and she was crouched in the dirt with them, drawing something with a stick. A map, he realized. She was teaching them geography. She'd changed. The elegant lady he'd married, the one in silk and jewels, was gone. This woman wore a plain wool dress that had been patched and repatched. Her hair was braided simply. Her hands were rough. She looked alive. One of the children asked a question. Lydia laughed, a real laugh, bright and unself-conscious, and ruffled the kid's hair. Something twisted in Rowan's chest. He'd sent her here to punish her, to remove her from his life. He'd expected her to wither. Instead, she was thriving. A man appeared from one of the nearby farms, carrying a basket. He said something to Lydia, and she smiled and took it. The man's wife joined them, and the three talked for a moment like old friends. These people, his people, the hardscrabble farmers and homesteaders who barely survived year to year, had accepted her. More than accepted. They clearly respected her. Rowan turned his horse around and rode away before she could see him, but he came back. Week after week, he found reasons to ride north. He never approached. He just watched from the trees, trying to reconcile the woman he was seeing with the schemer from the letters. It didn't fit. None of it fit. The woman who'd supposedly plotted to manipulate him was teaching children for free, was delivering babies and nursing the sick, was living on almost nothing and never complaining. The doubt started small. A whisper. What if he'd been wrong? 5 months after the wedding, Lydia collapsed while teaching. She'd been feeling off for days, tired, feverish, but she'd pushed through. There was too much to do. The Hendersons' baby was due any day. Little Mara was finally learning to write full sentences. Tom's father had asked her to look at his wife again, just to make sure the sickness was truly gone. She didn't have time to be ill. Then, halfway through a lesson on multiplication, the world tilted sideways. She woke up in Tom's house, in the same bed where she'd nursed his mother. A different woman sat beside her now. Mrs. Chen, the closest thing the settlement had to a healer. "You're burning up," Mrs. Chen said. "How long have you been sick?" "I'm not—" "Don't lie. You're a terrible liar." The old woman pressed a cool cloth to Lydia's forehead. "Lung fever, probably. You've been working yourself to death. The children will survive missing lessons. You need to rest." Lydia tried to sit up. The room spun. "I can't. There's too much. You don't have a choice, girl." Mrs. Chen's voice went soft. "Your body's giving out. You push any harder, and you won't come back from it." Lydia lay back down. The fever made everything feel distant and strange. "I can't stop," she whispered. "If I stop, I'm nothing. I'm just the woman he threw away." Mrs. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You're the woman who saved my grandson's life when he got the croup. You're the woman who taught my granddaughter to read. You're the woman who sat with old Mr. Peterson when he was dying so he wouldn't be alone." She gripped Lydia's hand. "You're not nothing. You're everything to us." Lydia closed her eyes. Tears leaked out. "Then why doesn't it feel like enough?" Ma, Rowan was in a council meeting when the rider arrived. "Your Grace." The messenger was one of his northern scouts, mud-splattered and breathing hard. "It's about the cottage." Every eye in the room turned to Rowan. His counselors knew about his wife, the marriage, the exile. They'd stopped asking questions months ago. Rowan kept his voice level. "What about it?" "The woman. She's sick. The settlers say it's bad." The room went silent. Rowan stood. "Meeting adjourned." "Your Grace," his steward began. "I said adjourned." He rode north at a pace that would have killed a lesser horse, changing mounts twice. The 4-hour journey took him 2.5. When he reached the settlement, he went straight to the largest farmhouse. A group of men stood outside, talking in low voices. They stopped when they saw him. "Where is she?" One of the men, the one Rowan recognized as the leader of the settlers, pointed. "Inside." "But Your Grace, she's in bad shape. The fever's been 3 days now. Mrs. Chen's doing everything she can, but—" Rowan didn't wait for him to finish. He pushed through the door. The room smelled like sickness, sweat and herbs and desperation. Mrs. Chen looked up from where she sat beside the bed. "Your Grace." She didn't sound surprised. She sounded tired. "She's not conscious, hasn't been since this morning." Rowan moved to the bedside. Lydia looked small. That was his first thought. She'd always seemed small. She was a head shorter than him, fine-boned and delicate. But this was different. This was the smallness of something being consumed. Her skin was gray. Her breathing was labored, each inhale sounding like it hurt. Someone had braided her hair, but strands had come loose and stuck to her fevered face. "What are you doing for her?" His voice came out harsh. Mrs. Chen didn't flinch. "Everything I know. But I'm not a real doctor, Your Grace. I'm just an old woman who's learned some things. She needs a physician. Nearest one is 2 days' ride. She doesn't have 2 days." The words hit like a fist. Rowan looked down at his wife, who he'd exiled, who he'd condemned, and felt something crack open in his chest. "Tell me what to do," he said. Mrs. Chen blinked. "Your Grace? Tell me how to help her. I'll do it." The Duke of Hale spent the next 3 days doing things dukes didn't do. He kept the fire going. He changed sweat-soaked sheets. He held Lydia's head up while Mrs. Chen forced bitter medicine between her lips. When the fever spiked and she started thrashing, he held her down as gently as he could so she wouldn't hurt herself. He barely slept, barely ate. The settlers brought him food and he ignored it. His focus narrowed to a single point: keep her breathing. On the second night, she got worse. The fever climbed so high Mrs. Chen shook her head. "I've done all I can," she said quietly. "The rest is up to her." "No." Rowan's voice was raw. "There has to be something else." "There isn't. I'm sorry." She left him alone with Lydia. Rowan sat in the chair beside the bed and looked at the woman he'd destroyed. Because that's what he'd done, wasn't it? He'd taken her father's sins and laid them on her shoulders. He'd seen evidence that confirmed what he already feared, that someone was trying to use him, exploit him, the way people had tried to exploit his father before the old Duke's fortune had crumbled, and he'd struck first. He'd never asked her, never given her a chance to explain. He'd just assumed she was guilty and sent her away to die. And now she was dying, and it was his fault, and he couldn't fix it. "I was wrong." His voice cracked. He was talking to an unconscious woman, confessing in the dark. "I was so sure I was right. I had the letters, I had the evidence, and I was so certain that you were just another person trying to take from me." Lydia's breathing rattled. "But you weren't, were you? You were just a girl whose father put her in an impossible situation, and instead of asking you about it, instead of giving you one chance to tell the truth, I threw you away." He reached out and took her hand. It was burning hot. "I watched you," he said. "For months I watched you. I saw what you built here. I saw how they love you, these people who have nothing, who you had no reason to care about. I saw you teach their children and heal their sick and make them believe they mattered." A tear ran down his face. He didn't wipe it away. "I saw you be everything I should have been, and I still didn't come back. I still didn't apologize. Because that would mean admitting I was wrong, and I couldn't. I've never been able to." His voice broke completely. "Please don't die. Please. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know you'd be justified if you hate me for the rest of your life. But please don't let the rest of your life be tonight. Please." Lydia didn't answer. She just kept breathing, each breath a little shallower than the last. Rowan put his head down on the edge of the bed and did something he hadn't done since his father died. He prayed. The fever broke at dawn. Mrs. Chen, who'd been dozing in the corner, woke with a start when Lydia's breathing changed. She rushed to the bedside, felt Lydia's forehead, and her weathered face split into a smile. "It broke," she said. "She's through the worst." Rowan, who'd been awake the entire night, slumped in his chair. "She'll live?" "She'll need time to recover, but yes, she'll live." The relief was so intense it felt like pain. Mrs. Chen studied him with sharp eyes. "You could have left any time in the last 3 days. Could have sent for a physician and ridden back to your estate, but you stayed." "Of course I stayed." "Why?" The question hung in the air between them. Rowan looked at Lydia, still unconscious but breathing easier now, color starting to return to her face, and told the truth. "Because she's my wife." Lydia woke slowly, swimming up through layers of fog. The first thing she noticed was that she didn't hurt, or rather, she hurt less than she had. The fire in her chest had died down to embers. The second thing she noticed was the hand holding hers. It was a man's hand, large, calloused, warm. She turned her head. It took effort, and her heart stopped. Rowan Hale was asleep in the chair beside her bed, his head resting on his arm, his hand clasped around hers like he was afraid she'd disappear. He looked terrible. His face was gaunt, shadowed with 3 days of beard growth. His clothes were rumpled. There were dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he'd been through hell. Lydia tried to speak. Her voice came out as a croak. Rowan's eyes snapped open. For a moment, he just stared at her, then, "You're awake." "What?" Lydia's throat was sandpaper. "What are you doing here?" Something complicated crossed his face. Relief and guilt, and something else she couldn't name. "I'm here because you were dying." His voice was rough. "I'm here because I—" He stopped, started again. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by horses." She tried to pull her hand away. He didn't let go. "Your Grace, I don't understand." "Don't call me that. It's your title. I don't want you to use it." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Lydia, I need to tell you something. I need to tell you everything, but first I need you to know. I investigated. After I sent you here, I kept investigating because something didn't feel right, and I found out the truth." Lydia went very still. "What truth?" "Your father did write those letters. He did plan to exploit our marriage. But you didn't know." Rowan's grip on her hand tightened. "You signed the marriage contract before any of those letters were written. You agreed to marry me to save your family from debtor's prison, not to scheme. And when your father told you his plan afterward, you refused. I have the letter you wrote him. You told him you wouldn't lie to me or manipulate me, even if it meant losing everything." The room tilted. Lydia's eyes burned. "You knew? You knew I was innocent, and you still left me here?" Rowan flinched like she'd hit him. "I found out 2 months ago, and I didn't know what to do. I'd been so certain you were guilty. I'd exiled you, ruined your life, and then I found out I'd destroyed an innocent woman. I couldn't face it. I couldn't face you." "So you did nothing?" "I did worse than nothing. I watched you suffer and didn't help. I let my pride and my shame keep me frozen." He looked down at their joined hands. "There's no excuse for what I did. To any of it. Not the exile, not the silence afterward. I took my fear and my past and my damage, and I made you pay for all of it." Lydia pulled her hand free. She needed to think, and she couldn't do that while he was touching her. "Why are you here now?" "Because you were dying. Because when I heard you were sick, I couldn't stay away anymore. Because I've spent 3 days terrified that you'd die without ever knowing how sorry I am. Sorry. The word felt hollow. You're sorry. Yes. Do you have any idea what you did to me? Her voice shook. You didn't just send me away. You made me believe I was worthless, that I deserved to be thrown out like trash. I spent months thinking I must have done something wrong, something I didn't even know about, to deserve what you did. I know. You don't know. You can't know. Tears slid down her face. I rebuilt myself from nothing. I made a life here because I had no choice. And now you show up and tell me you've known I was innocent for months, and you expect… what? Forgiveness? No. Rowan's voice was quiet. I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know the truth. I needed you to know that what happened wasn't your fault. It was mine. All of it. They looked at each other across the space between the bed and the chair, 5 feet of distance. An ocean of damage. I think you should leave, Lydia said finally. Rowan stood. For a moment he looked like he wanted to say something else. Then he just nodded. He made it to the door before Lydia spoke again. Your Grace? He turned back. Thank you. For staying while I was sick. You didn't have to do that. Something in his expression crumbled. Yes, I did, he said. Then he left. Lydia lay in the empty room and cried until she fell back asleep. Rowan didn't go back to his estate. He went to the cottage, Lydia's cottage, and started chopping wood. Tom's father found him there an hour later, surrounded by neatly stacked logs. Your Grace? Rowan buried the axe in a stump and straightened. Her roof needs repair before the snow, and the chimney's partially blocked. I'm going to fix it. The farmer blinked. That's not Duke's work. I don't care what it is. It needs doing. Word spread faster than fire. The Duke of Hale was living in the woods, sleeping in a tent pitched outside his wife's cottage, spending his days repairing her home, cutting her firewood, making sure her shelves were stocked for winter. He didn't speak to her. She was still recovering at Tom's house, regaining her strength. But every day, he worked. He fixed the sagging roof. He rebuilt the chimney. He replaced the broken shutters. He expanded the cottage, added a second room, a proper hearth, a storage cellar. The settlers watched in bewilderment. What's he doing? One of the women asked Mrs. Chen. The old healer shook her head. Penance. 3 weeks after the fever broke, Lydia was strong enough to walk back to the cottage. She stopped at the tree line and stared. Her one-room hovel had been transformed. The roof was straight and solid, covered in new thatch. The walls had been reinforced. There were glass windows, actual glass. Smoke rose from a properly functioning chimney. Rowan stood in front of it, adding logs to a neat woodpile that was already taller than he was. He saw her and froze. They looked at each other across the clearing. I didn't know you were coming back today, he said finally. Mrs. Chen said I was well enough. Lydia moved closer. What is all this? You needed a better house. Winter's coming. So you built me one. I had help. Some of the settlers, they wanted to contribute. He gestured helplessly at the cottage. You shouldn't have to live in a ruin. Not when I have the means to give you better. Lydia climbed the 2 steps to the new front porch. She had a porch now and pushed open the door. Inside was even more shocking. A real bed, not a cot. A proper table and chairs, shelves stocked with food and supplies. A rocking chair by the fireplace, rugs on the floor. It looked like a home. She turned to find Rowan standing in the doorway, watching her with uncertain eyes. Why are you doing this? She asked. Because I owe you a debt I can never repay. Because saying sorry isn't enough. Because… He stopped, swallowed hard. Because you deserve better than what I gave you. Better than this cottage, even with the improvements. Better than me. Lydia sat down in the rocking chair. Her legs were still weak. I'm not going to forgive you just because you fixed my house. I know. I might never forgive you. I know that too. She studied him, this powerful duke standing in her doorway like a supplicant. Then what do you want? A chance, Rowan said quietly. Not to go back to what we were. We were never anything real, but a chance to start over. To let you decide what happens next. Whatever you choose, I'll respect it. If you want me to leave and never come back, I'll go. If you want an annulment, I'll give it to you. If you want to stay here and never speak to me again, I'll make sure you're provided for. And if I want something else," his breath caught, "then tell me what it is and I'll do everything in my power to give it to you." Lydia rocked slowly, feeling the chair's gentle motion. Outside, she could hear children's voices, her students probably, wondering if lessons would resume now that she was back. She'd built a life here. Against every odd, against all reason, she'd made something good out of the worst thing that had ever happened to her. The question was, what did she do with it now? She looked at Rowan, really looked at him, saw the guilt eating him alive, the desperate hope he was trying to hide, the man beneath the title, damaged and flawed and trying. "I don't know what I want yet," she said finally. "I'm still angry. I'm still hurt. You broke something in me, and I don't know if it can be fixed." "I understand. But I'm not sending you away. Not yet." She met his eyes. "You can stay. Not in here. You can keep your tent or build your own shelter or whatever. But you can stay in the settlement, work with the people here, see what I've built, and maybe we can figure out what comes next." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even close. But it was a door left open instead of slammed shut. Rowan looked like she'd given him the world. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I won't waste this chance. I swear to you, Lydia, I won't waste it." She wanted to believe him. Part of her, despite everything, did. That night, after Rowan had retreated to his tent and the settlement had gone quiet, Lydia sat by her new fireplace and took stock. 6 months ago, she'd been a new bride, cast out and powerless. Now she was a teacher, a healer, a member of a community, a woman who'd survived and then thrived despite everything working against her. The Duke who'd exiled her was sleeping in a tent outside her home, begging for a second chance. The irony wasn't lost on her, but neither was the danger, because part of her, a part she didn't want to acknowledge, had felt something when Rowan held her hand while she was sick. When he'd confessed in the dark, thinking she couldn't hear. When he'd looked at her rebuilt cottage with desperate hope. She'd felt possibility. And that terrified her more than the exile ever had, because she'd survived abandonment. She'd survived winter and sickness and starting over from nothing. She didn't know if she could survive hope. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the first hints of snow. Winter was coming, the real winter, the kind that killed people who weren't prepared. Lydia looked at her stocked shelves, her solid walls, her warm fire. She was prepared this time, for winter, at least. For whatever came next with Rowan Hale, that remained to be seen. The first snow came 2 days later, and with it, trouble. Lydia was teaching when she heard the commotion. Raised voices from the direction of the Henderson farm. Then the sound of horses. Too many horses for a casual visit. The children looked up from their slates, eyes wide. "Stay here," Lydia said, already moving toward the sound. She found a crowd gathered near the settlement's main path. A dozen men on horseback, led by someone she recognized from her brief time at the estate. Lord Garrett, one of Rowan's senior counselors. His face was tight with disapproval. Rowan stood between the riders and the settlers, his posture rigid. "You can't be serious," Garrett was saying. "Living in a tent? Working like a common laborer? Your Grace, this is beneath your station. My station isn't your concern. It is when your absence is causing chaos at the estate. We have petitions waiting, trade agreements that need your signature, a border dispute that's about to turn violent. Then handle it." Garrett's horse shifted, picking up on its rider's agitation. "We can't handle everything. You're the Duke. These people need you." "These people need me too," Rowan gestured at the settlers. "These people?" Garrett's voice dripped with disdain. "They're homesteaders, frontier rabble. They're not worth—" "Finish that sentence," Rowan said softly, "and you'll regret it." The two men stared at each other. The settlers watched, silent and tense. Lydia could feel the weight of their attention, the way they were calculating what this meant for them. Then Garrett's eyes found her. "This is about her." It wasn't a question. "You're playing at penance because you feel guilty about the wife you exiled. Very noble, Your Grace. But how long before you tire of this game and remember who you actually are?" Lydia felt every eye turn to her. She lifted her chin and stepped forward. Lord Garrett? Her voice was steady. The Duke is here because he chooses to be. What happens next is between him and me. It has nothing to do with you. Garrett's lip curled. You think you have power here? You're a disgraced wife living in the wilderness. You're nothing. She's our teacher, Mrs. Chen said from the crowd. She saved my grandson. She delivered my baby, another woman added. She taught my daughter to read, said Tom's father. More voices joined in. One by one, the settlers stepped forward, putting themselves between Lydia and the mounted men. Garrett looked genuinely surprised. Then his face hardened. How touching. But sentiment doesn't change reality. Your Grace, you have responsibilities. Real responsibilities. Not, he waved dismissively at the settlement, whatever this is. Get out. Rowan's voice was cold enough to freeze wine. Go back to the estate. Tell the council I'll return when I'm ready, and not a moment before. And if they don't accept that, then they can try to replace me. I'm sure that will go well. It was a power play, a reminder that for all his current circumstances, Rowan was still the Duke, still the man who controlled thousands of acres and hundreds of lives, still dangerous. Garrett seemed to remember that. His jaw worked. Then he jerked his horse's head around. This isn't over, he said. Then he and his men rode away, leaving churned mud and tension in their wake. The settlers slowly dispersed, muttering among themselves. Lydia watched them go, seeing the new wariness in their eyes. They'd defended her, but they'd also just been reminded of exactly who Rowan was, what he represented, the power he wielded and the world he came from, a world that looked at people like them and saw frontier rabble. Rowan turned to her, and she saw the frustration in his face. I'm sorry, Garrett had no right. He's not wrong, though, is he? Lydia kept her voice low. You do have responsibilities, people who depend on you, and you're here instead. I'm here because I need to be. For how long? A week? A month? Until the guilt fades and you remember you have a duchy to run? The words came out sharper than she'd intended. Rowan flinched. You think I'm going to abandon this? Abandon you again? I think you're a duke, and dukes don't live in tents and chopwood. I think eventually the real world is going to drag you back, and then where does that leave us? I don't know, Rowan said honestly. But I'm not leaving yet. Not until what? Lydia wrapped her arms around herself. The temperature was dropping. Not until I forgive you. Not until you feel like you've suffered enough. What's the end game here? Rowan opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't have an answer. Lydia turned away. I need to get back to the children. She left him standing there and tried to ignore the hollow feeling in her chest. That night, 3 more families arrived at the settlement. Lydia heard the wagons before she saw them, the creak of wheels, the jangle of harnesses. She stepped out of her cottage to find chaos. Overloaded wagons, exhausted horses, a dozen people including 5 children, all looking half-frozen and desperate. Tom's father was already there, talking to a bearded man who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Couldn't stay, the man was saying. The landlord doubled our rent. We couldn't pay it, so he burned our crops and threw us off the land. You came from Lord Ashford's territory? What was left of it? Half the farmers got evicted this month. We heard there was land here, that the Duke of Hale was offering homesteads. Tom's father's face went grim. There is land, but it's hard land. And winter's here. We don't have anywhere else to go. More settlers gathered, assessing the newcomers. Lydia could read the calculation in their faces. More people meant more mouths to feed when supplies were already tight. But it also meant more hands for the work, more families to share the burden. Mrs. Chen pushed through the crowd. How many sick or injured? 2 of the children have fever. My wife, she's pregnant. The journey was rough. Get them inside. Now. Mrs. Chen started barking orders. Maria, boil water. James, fetch blankets from my house. Tom, get your father's wagon. We need to move these people before they freeze. The settlement sprang into action. Lydia found herself helping unload wagons, carrying children, distributing what little food could be spared. One of the new families had a girl about Mara's age, thin and pale, with a cough that sounded like breaking glass. Lydia wrapped her in a blanket and carried her to the nearest shelter. What's your name? She asked gently. Sarah. The girl's teeth were chattering. Are we going to die? No, Lydia said firmly. You're safe now. She hoped it was true. By morning, the settlement had absorbed the refugees, but the strain was showing. Food stores that were supposed to last through winter were suddenly feeding twice as many mouths. Shelter was overcrowded. The children with fever needed medicine they didn't have. Lydia sat with Mrs. Chen, taking inventory of their supplies. We're short, the old woman said bluntly. Even before these new families, we were cutting it close. Now? She shook her head. We won't make it to spring. What if we rationed more strictly? We're already rationing. Cut any deeper, and people start starving. Mrs. Chen's face was carved from worry. We need help. Real help. From where? The Duke's estate? That's 4 hours away, and I doubt his counselors would approve emergency supplies for a bunch of frontier settlers. Mrs. Chen gave her a long look. But the Duke himself might, if someone asked. Lydia's stomach clenched. I can't or won't. He's here doing penance, not running a charity, and even if I asked, requesting ducal resources for my own benefit, people would say I'm using him, that I'm manipulating. Who cares what people say? Mrs. Chen leaned forward. We have children who might not survive winter. We have a pregnant woman who traveled for 3 days in a wagon and now might lose the baby. We have families who came here because they had nowhere else to go. Her voice went hard. Your pride or his guilt or whatever complicated thing is between you two, it doesn't matter. Not compared to that. Lydia looked down at the inventory list. The numbers didn't lie. What if he says no? Then we're no worse off than we are now. But if you don't ask? Mrs. Chen stood, bones creaking. Then children die, and you have to live with knowing you could have prevented it. Lydia found Rowan behind her cottage, splitting logs for the new family's fires. He'd stripped down to his shirt despite the cold, and sweat gleamed on his face. The pile of split wood was already impressive. He'd been at it for hours. We need to talk, she said. He buried the axe in the stump and turned. What's wrong? The new families. We don't have enough supplies to get everyone through winter. Understanding flashed across his face. How much do you need? I'm not asking for charity. Lydia. How much? She told him. Listed the food, the medicine, the basic supplies. The numbers were staggering, enough to strain even a duke's resources if he wasn't careful about it. Rowan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, I'll send riders today. The supplies will be here within a week. Just like that? Just like that. He wiped sweat from his forehead. Did you think I'd refuse? I thought you might question whether it's a good use of your resources. These are my people. Of course it's a good use. He paused. And even if they weren't, even if they were complete strangers, I'd still help. Because you asked. The simplicity of it hit her sideways. No conditions, no negotiations, just immediate agreement. Your counselors are going to be furious. Let them. Rowan's mouth quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. Garrett's already convinced I've lost my mind, might as well prove him right. Lydia should have left it there, should have thanked him, and walked away. Instead, she said, Why are you really doing this? And don't say penance. There's easier ways to atone than living in a tent and chopping wood for strangers. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then, when my father died, I inherited a duchy that was collapsing. He'd been a good man but a terrible administrator. He trusted the wrong people, made bad investments, let corruption fester. By the time I took over, we were months from bankruptcy. I heard about that. What you didn't hear is how I fixed it. I fired half the staff, canceled contracts, raised rents on tenant farmers who were already struggling. I cut everything that wasn't essential and rebuilt from nothing. His voice went flat. I saved the duchy, but I heard a lot of people doing it. Good people who'd done nothing wrong except have the misfortune of depending on a failing estate. He picked up the axe again, turned it over in his hands. I told myself it was necessary, that I had to be hard, ruthless, willing to make difficult choices. And I was right. The duchy survived. But somewhere along the way, I started seeing threats everywhere. Started assuming everyone wanted something from me. Started believing that kindness was weakness and trust was stupidity. That's why you believed the letters. That's why I didn't question them. They confirmed what I already thought, that people would use me if I let them, that my wife was just another person trying to take what was mine. He met her eyes. I was so busy protecting myself, I didn't see what was right in front of me, that you weren't a threat. You were just a frightened girl trying to save her family the only way she could. Lydia's throat tightened. You still should have asked me. I know, but I didn't, because asking would have meant risking being lied to. And I couldn't. I can't. He stopped, frustrated. I don't know how to trust people. I never learned. So why are you here? Why are you doing all this if you can't trust anyone? Because you're teaching me. The words came out raw. Every day I watch you with these people. The way you trust them, help them, believe in them, even when there's no guarantee they won't disappoint you. You're the bravest person I've ever met, and you don't even realize it. Lydia didn't know what to say to that. Rowan set the axe down and moved closer, not touching, but near enough that she could feel his warmth in the cold air. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said quietly. I'm not even asking you to like me. I'm just asking you to let me learn. Let me watch how you do this, how you build instead of destroy, how you trust instead of suspect. Let me become someone worthy of the second chance you gave me. And then what? Her voice was barely a whisper. You go back to your estate and apply these lessons to being a better duke? Leave here and never look back? Is that what you want? I don't know what I want. The honesty hurt. Part of me wants you gone. Part of me... She cut herself off. Part of you what? Lydia looked up at him, at this complicated, damaged man who'd ruined her life and then tried to rebuild it, who'd exiled her and then refused to leave, who was standing in the snow in his shirt sleeves looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Part of me is terrified, she admitted, because I'm starting to... She stopped again, couldn't say it. Rowan's breath caught. Starting to what? Before she could answer, a shout went up from the settlement. Both of them turned. One of the new family's wagons was on fire. They ran. By the time they reached the wagon, flames were climbing the canvas cover, and people were frantically pulling supplies out of the back. The pregnant woman, Mrs. Dawson, was screaming that her medicine chest was still inside. Everyone back, Tom's father yelled. Rowan pushed through the crowd. How much is still in there? Half their supplies, everything they own. Rowan didn't hesitate. He grabbed a blanket, dunked it in a water trough, and wrapped it around himself. What are you... Lydia started. He was already moving. He ducked under the burning canvas and disappeared into the smoke. Lydia's heart stopped. Seconds crawled by. The flames grew higher. Someone said they should pull the wagon apart before the fire spread to the other shelters. Then Rowan emerged, coughing, covered in soot, his arms full of salvaged supplies. He dumped them in the mud and went back in. He's insane, someone muttered. He went in 3 more times. Each time he came out with more supplies, more of the family's possessions. The 4th time, part of the wagon's frame collapsed behind him. Lydia couldn't watch and couldn't look away. Finally, Tom's father and 2 other men formed a chain and pulled out the last of what could be saved. Rowan emerged last, his blanket smoking, his face black with ash. The wagon was a total loss, but most of the supplies had been rescued. Mrs. Dawson clutched her medicine chest and sobbed with relief. Her husband gripped Rowan's hand. Thank you. We can't... There's no way to repay... You don't need to repay anything. Rowan was still coughing. Just get your wife inside before she freezes. The man nodded and led his family away. The crowd slowly dispersed, leaving Lydia and Rowan standing in the mud, surrounded by the smell of smoke and burnt wood. You could have died, Lydia said. I didn't. You could have. For supplies, for things. For their things, everything they had. Rowan wiped soot from his eyes. What was I supposed to do, let it burn? You're the Duke. You could have sent someone else. There wasn't time. He looked at her, his eyes bright in his soot-stained face. And I'm not just the Duke. Not here. Here I don't know what I am. But I'm not above anyone else. Lydia's hands were shaking, from cold or fear or something else. She wasn't sure. You're bleeding, she said. Rowan looked down. His hand was cut, blood mixing with the soot. It's nothing. It's not nothing. Come on. She grabbed his uninjured hand and pulled him toward her cottage. Inside, she made him sit while she cleaned and bandaged the cut. The wound wasn't deep, but it was long, slicing across his palm. "This is going to scar," she said. "I have others." She glanced up. "From what?" "From learning to fight, from falling off horses, from being a stupid teenager who thought he was invincible." He watched her work. "From 8 years of holding on so tight I forgot how to let go." Lydia wrapped the bandage carefully. Her hands were steadier now. "Mrs. Chen was right," she said. "I can't keep living in this space between anger and whatever else this is. It's not fair to either of us." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I need to decide. Actually decide what I want from you, from this situation, from everything." She tied off the bandage. "And I need you to be honest with me. Not self-flagellating, not doing penance. Honest. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Do you want to stay married to me?" The question hung between them. Rowan's expression shifted. Surprise, then something deeper. "Yes," he said finally. "Not because of guilt or obligation, because I look at you and I see—" He stopped, searching for words. "I see everything I want to be. Everything I'm not. And I know I have no right to ask for anything from you after what I did. But if there's even the smallest chance you might someday want—" "Stop." Lydia held up her hand. "Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Tell me the truth. The selfish truth." Rowan took a breath. "I want you. Not as penance or redemption or proof that I'm a better man. I want you because you're brilliant and brave and you make me believe the world isn't as cold as I thought it was. I want to wake up next to you every morning and spend my days earning the right to be in your life. I want to build something real with you instead of the sham we started with." His voice dropped. "And I'm terrified you'll say no, because I've never wanted anything this much, and I don't know what I'll do if I can't have it." Lydia's heart was racing. That's the truth? That's the selfish, desperate, completely honest truth. She should have been angry, should have told him it was too soon, that he hadn't earned this, that she couldn't trust him. Instead, she leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't soft or gentle or any of the things a first kiss should be. It was fierce and desperate and tasted like smoke and ash and 6 months of loneliness finally breaking open. Rowan made a sound, surprise or relief or both, and his bandaged hand came up to cup her face. His other hand found her waist, pulled her closer. Lydia had been kissed before. Chaste kisses from suitors, the perfunctory kiss at her wedding. This was nothing like those. This was drowning and being saved at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rowan's eyes were wide. "Lydia, don't." She pressed her fingers to his lips. "Don't analyze it or apologize for it or ask what it means. Just—" The cottage door slammed open. Mara stood there, wide-eyed and panting. "Miss Lydia, you have to come quick. Some men came from Lord Ashford's territory. They're saying the new families are runaway tenants. They want to take them back." Lydia's blood went cold. She looked at Rowan, saw her own dread reflected in his face. They ran. The settlement square was packed. The new families huddled together, surrounded by armed men on horseback, 6 of them, wearing Lord Ashford's colors. The leader was a hard-faced man with a scar running down his cheek. He sat his horse like a man used to intimidation. "These people broke contract," he was saying to Tom's father. "They owe Lord Ashford 2 years' labor. We're taking them back." "They're refugees," Tom's father argued. "You can't." "We can, and we will. Lord Ashford has legal claim." The bearded man from the night before stepped forward. "We left because he raised our rent to impossible levels and burned our crops when we couldn't pay. That's breach of contract on his end." "That's not how the law sees it." "Then the law is wrong." The scarred man's hand went to his sword. Around the square, the other riders did the same. The settlers tensed. They outnumbered Ashford's men, but they were farmers, not soldiers. Then Rowan stepped into the square. The change was instantaneous. He didn't say anything, didn't draw a weapon. He just moved into the space between the settlers and the riders, and suddenly he wasn't the man who'd been chopping wood or rescuing supplies. He was the Duke of Hale, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly, "I believe you're on my land." The scarred man's sneer faltered. "Your Grace, we didn't realize—" Didn't realize you'd crossed into my territory while attempting to abduct my people? How unfortunate. They're not your people. They're Lord Ashford's tenants. We're his tenants. They're now residents of my land, under my protection, which means you're threatening ducal subjects. That's a serious offense. The man shifted in his saddle. Lord Ashford will want compensation for his loss. Tell Lord Ashford that if he wants to discuss his business practices, specifically the ones that drive desperate families to flee in winter, he can request a formal audience. Rowan's smile could have cut glass. I'm sure the regional magistrate would be fascinated to hear about it. You can't. I can. I am. And if you're still on my land in the next 5 minutes, I'll assume you're here to cause trouble. And I deal with trouble harshly. It was a bluff. Rowan was alone, unarmed, outnumbered. But he delivered it with such absolute certainty that for a moment, even Lydia believed he could back it up. The scarred man stared at him. Then, slowly, he turned his horse. Lord Ashford won't forget this. I'm counting on it, Rowan said. The riders left, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. The settlers erupted into relieved chatter. The new families were crying, thanking Rowan, thanking anyone who'd listen. Lydia watched it all and felt dread settle in her stomach, because Rowan had just made an enemy of another lord to protect people he barely knew. Had used his title and power not to punish or control, but to shield the powerless. Had become, in that moment, exactly the kind of duke she'd hoped existed when she'd agreed to marry him. And that terrified her, because she was falling in love with him, and she didn't know if she could survive it if he left. Rowan found her at the edge of the crowd. Are you all right? You just threatened a neighboring lord for people you met yesterday. Yes. Your council is going to lose their minds. Probably. You don't care? Rowan looked at her, and his expression was completely open, vulnerable in a way she had never seen from him. I care about one thing, he said, and it's not my council's opinion. Before Lydia could respond, Mrs. Chen appeared, looking grim. Sarah, the little girl with the cough. She's getting worse. Fever spiked an hour ago. I need the medicine from your supplies, but it's not enough. She needs a real physician. The nearest one is 2 days away, Rowan said. Then she'll be dead in 3. Mrs. Chen's voice was flat. Unless someone can get to him faster. Rowan was already moving. All right, tonight. I can make it in 20 hours if I push hard enough. In this weather, on winter roads? Lydia grabbed his arm. You'll kill yourself and the horse. Then I'll get a better horse. But I'm going. He said it with such finality that Lydia knew arguing was useless. I'm coming with you, she said. Absolutely not. She's my student, and you don't know which medicines to request. I do. They stared at each other. Around them, the settlement held its breath. Finally, Rowan nodded. We leave in an hour. Dress warm. As he strode away to prepare, Mrs. Chen put a hand on Lydia's shoulder. You're sure about this? Lydia thought about Sarah's terrified question. Are we going to die? Thought about the desperate ride ahead, the risk, the absolute certainty that Rowan would go whether she accompanied him or not. Thought about the kiss that was still burning on her lips. No, she said honestly. But I'm going anyway. They left in darkness, under a sky so heavy with clouds it felt like the world had a lid on it. Lydia had never ridden through a winter night before, had never pushed a horse this hard, never felt wind cut through wool and leather like it was nothing. Within an hour, she couldn't feel her face. Within 2, she'd stopped trying to count how many times she nearly fell. Rowan rode ahead, his horse's breath coming in white clouds. He'd barely spoken since they'd left. Just checked that she was still with him every few miles, his eyes dark with worry. Not worry for Sarah, Lydia realized. Worry for her. I can keep up, she called when he slowed for the 3rd time. I know, that's not... He cut himself off. How are your hands? She looked down. Even through gloves, her fingers were going numb. Fine. You're a terrible liar. Then stop asking. They rode on. The forest closed in around them, trees like black bones against the darker sky. No moon, no stars, just the narrow path and the sound of hooves on frozen ground. Somewhere around the 4th hour, it started snowing. Not the gentle snow from before. This was the kind that came sideways, that blinded and disoriented. Rowan pulled up, swearing under his breath. We need to slow down. If the horses can't see the path, We don't have time to slow down. Lydia urged her horse forward. Sarah doesn't have time. Sarah definitely doesn't have time if we ride off a cliff in a blizzard. So don't ride off a cliff. Rowan caught her reins, forced her to stop. Lydia, I know you're scared for her. I am too. But we're no use to anyone if we're dead. She wanted to argue. Wanted to scream that they'd already wasted an hour preparing, that every minute mattered, that a little girl was dying while they sat here debating. Instead, she said, "How much farther?" "Another 15 hours, maybe more in this weather." 15 hours. Sarah might not have 15 hours. Lydia pulled her reins free and kicked her horse forward into the storm. Behind her, Rowan cursed and followed. Dawn came gray and miserable. They'd made it through the worst of the forest, but now the terrain turned treacherous. Hills that rose steep and sudden, ravines hidden by snow. Twice, Lydia's horse stumbled. The second time, she nearly went over its head. Rowan was off his mount before she could blink, checking her over with rough, efficient hands. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." "You're shaking." "I'm cold. There's a difference." She pushed his hands away and stood, testing her weight. Nothing broken, just bruised dignity and mounting exhaustion. They'd been riding for 8 hours straight. Her body felt like it belonged to someone else, someone older and much more broken. Rowan's face was drawn, lines of fatigue etched deep around his eyes. But when he looked at her, there was something else there, something that made her chest tight. "We can rest," he said, "just for an hour. There's a shepherd's hut about a mile east." "No." Lydia grabbed her horse's reins. "We keep moving. You're exhausted. So are you." "I'm used to this." "You're not." He moved closer, lowered his voice. "Lydia, I know what you're trying to prove, that you're strong enough, brave enough, that you don't need— This isn't about proving anything." Her voice came out sharper than intended. "This is about a 7-year-old girl who asked me if she was going to die, and I told her no. I told her she was safe, so I'm going to make sure I didn't lie." Rowan studied her face. Then he nodded once and mounted his horse. They rode on. Around midday, they hit the first real obstacle. The bridge was out. Not damaged, completely gone. The river it had spanned was swollen with snowmelt, running fast and dark. Chunks of ice spun in the current like broken teeth. Rowan pulled up short, scanning both directions. "There's another bridge 5 miles south. That adds 2 hours to the journey." "I'm aware." "We could ford it here." "In winter runoff, with ice?" Rowan shook his head. "That's suicide." Lydia looked at the river. It was wide, but not impossibly so, maybe 30 feet across. The current was vicious, but there were rocks breaking the surface. If they were careful— "No," Rowan said, reading her expression. "Absolutely not. You said yourself we're losing time." "Not enough time to justify drowning." "I'm not asking your permission." Lydia urged her horse toward the bank. Rowan grabbed her reins again, harder this time. "Stop. Just stop and think for 1 second." "I have thought. Sarah's dying and we're wasting daylight arguing." "Sarah is dying, yes. And if we die trying to save her, then she dies anyway and we've accomplished nothing except getting ourselves killed." His voice rose. "Is that what you want? To throw your life away on a maybe? Better than sitting here doing nothing. This isn't nothing. This is keeping you alive." "I didn't ask you to keep me alive. I asked you to help me save a child." They glared at each other, horses shifting restlessly beneath them. Then Rowan let go of her reins and dismounted. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer, just started stripping off his heavy coat, his boots. Down to his shirt and trousers, he walked to the river's edge. "Rowan, if we're doing this, we're doing it right." He picked up a long branch, testing its weight. "I'll go first. Check the depth, find the safest path. If I make it across, you follow exactly where I stepped. If I don't say that. If I don't, you turn around and take the long route. No arguments." Lydia's throat closed. "You don't have to—" "Yes, I do." He looked back at her, and his expression was raw. "You think I'm going to watch you risk your life when I can risk mine instead? After everything I've done to you? This isn't about penance." "I know. It's about the fact that I—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "It's about the fact that I can't lose you. Not now. Not when I've just started to understand what having you means." Before Lydia could respond, he stepped into the water. The cold hit him like a fist. She saw it in the way his whole body locked up, the sharp intake of breath. But he kept moving, using the branch to test each step, inching forward against the current. Halfway across, his foot slipped. Lydia's heart stopped. Rowan caught himself on a rock, barely. Water surged around his waist, trying to drag him downstream. For a horrible second, she thought he'd lose his grip. Then he hauled himself up, kept moving. When he finally reached the far bank, he turned back, breathing hard. "Your turn," he called. "Follow my exact path." Lydia wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him this was insane, that they should turn back. But Sarah's face floated in her mind. Are we going to die? She dismounted and started stripping down. The cold was worse than she'd imagined. Her feet went numb immediately. The current pulled at her legs, trying to sweep her away. Every step was a negotiation with drowning. Rowan called instructions from the far bank, his voice cutting through the water's roar. "Left. No, your left. There's a hole just ahead, step wide." Lydia's teeth were chattering so hard she couldn't answer. She just nodded and kept moving. The horses came next. Getting them across was even harder. They fought the current, eyes rolling white with fear. Lydia's mount nearly bolted halfway through, but finally, impossibly, they were all on the far side. Soaked, shaking, but alive. Rowan wrapped his coat around Lydia's shoulders. She was shaking too hard to protest. "We need to find shelter," he said. "Get warm before we freeze." "No time. Make time. You're hypothermic. We both are." He was already scanning the landscape. "There. See that outcrop? Might be a cave." There was. A shallow depression in the rock, barely deep enough to block the wind, but it was something. Rowan built a fire with hands that barely worked. The flames caught, reluctant but determined. Lydia huddled close, waiting for feeling to return to her extremities. "That was stupid," she said when she could talk again. "Yes." "We could have died." "Yes." "We saved 2 hours." "Yes." Rowan sat beside her, so close their shoulders touched. "Worth it?" Lydia thought about it. About the risk, the cold, the moment she'd watched him nearly swept away by the current. "Ask me when we get back," she said. They sat in silence, watching the fire. Outside the small shelter, wind howled and snow fell in sheets. Finally, Rowan said, "Why are you really doing this? The truth this time." "I told you, Sarah is part of it, but there's more." He turned to look at her. "You're risking your life for a child you barely know. Why?" Lydia pulled the coat tighter. "Because someone has to." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I have." She stared into the flames. "My whole life, I was told I mattered because of who I was born to. My family name, my father's connections, my potential marriage value. When you exiled me, you took all that away. And I really thought, that meant I was nothing." Her voice cracked. "But then I started teaching those children, started helping the settlers, and I realized I could matter for different reasons. For what I did instead of who I was. For the choices I made instead of the circumstances I was born into." She looked at him. "Sarah asked me if she was going to die. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could say, I don't know and protect myself from the pain of failing, or I could say no and then do everything in my power to make it true. So that's what I'm doing. I'm making it true." Rowan was quiet for a long time. Then, "You're extraordinary. You know that?" "I'm stubborn." "That too." He smiled, small and tired but real. "It's one of the things I love about you." The word hung between them. Love. Lydia's heart stuttered. "Rowan, I know it's too soon, that I haven't earned it, that you probably don't feel the same way." He wasn't looking at her anymore, was staring at the fire like it held answers. "But I need you to know, before we get back, before everything gets complicated again, I need you to know that what I feel for you isn't guilt or obligation or anything else that simple." He finally met her eyes. "I'm in love with you, desperately, inconveniently, completely. And I don't expect you to say it back. I just needed to say it once, out loud, so you'd know." Lydia couldn't breathe. The shelter felt too small, the fire too hot, everything too much. You can't say something like that and expect, I don't expect anything. I'm just telling you the truth. Stop being reasonable. It's unnerving. That startled a laugh out of him. What do you want me to be? I don't know. Lydia stood, started pacing the tiny space. Angry, demanding, something I can argue with, not just honest and patient and Lydia. Acting like you're okay with me not loving you back when you clearly... Lydia, what? Do you? Love me back? The question stopped her cold. Did she? She thought about the past weeks, the way her heart jumped when she saw him, the way she found excuses to be near him, the kiss that had felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff at the same time, the way she'd felt when he'd stepped into that river, willing to drown if it meant keeping her safe. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know if what I feel is love or just, I'm so angry at you still, for what you did, for the months I spent thinking I deserved it. But I'm also, when I look at you, I see, you see what? Everything I want and everything I'm afraid of. The admission hurt. Because what if you leave again? What if your counsel decides this has gone on long enough and drags you back? What if you wake up one day and realize frontier life isn't sustainable for a duke, and I'm not worth the complication? That won't happen. You can't promise that. I can. I am. Rowan moved closer. I would give up the duchy for you. Today. Right now. I'd walk away from all of it if that's what it took to prove. Don't. Lydia held up her hand. Don't make grand gestures. Don't offer to sacrifice everything. Just... She took a shaky breath. Just give me time. To figure out what I feel. To trust that this is real. Rowan nodded slowly. How much time? I don't know. Days? Weeks? I don't know, she repeated, more firmly. But I need you to be okay with that. With not knowing. Can you do that? He was quiet. Then, yes, I can do that. The fire crackled. Outside, the storm was easing. We should go, Lydia said. We've lost enough time. They mounted up and rode back into the cold. Awesome. They reached the physician's house just after nightfall. Dr. Marcus was an older man with kind eyes and ink-stained fingers. He listened to their story without interrupting, then immediately started packing supplies. Lung fever in a child that young, that's serious. You did right to come. He handed Rowan a carefully wrapped bundle. These are the medicines. Instructions are written inside. But I should come with you. If the fever's as bad as you say... It's a hard ride, Rowan warned. We barely made it here. Then we'll barely make it back. Dr. Marcus grabbed his coat. I'm not letting a child die because I was too comfortable to help. They left immediately, 3 riders now, pushing back through the darkness. The return journey was worse, exhaustion compounded by the knowledge of what waited for them. Lydia kept imagining arriving too late, kept seeing Sarah's small face going still and cold. She pushed the thoughts away and rode faster. They reached the settlement near dawn, horses half dead from exertion, riders not much better. Mrs. Chen met them at Sarah's bedside. One look at her face told Lydia everything. She's still alive, the old woman said, but barely. The fever won't break. Dr. Marcus took over immediately. He worked with quiet efficiency, administering medicine, applying compresses, listening to Sarah's labored breathing with an expression that gave nothing away. Hours passed. Lydia sat with Sarah's mother, holding her hand while the woman prayed and wept and hoped. Finally, as the sun climbed toward noon, Sarah's fever broke. Her breathing eased. Color returned to her face. She opened her eyes and asked for water in a voice like broken glass. Her mother sobbed with relief. Dr. Marcus stepped back, wiping his hands. She'll need careful monitoring for the next few days, but she should recover fully. Lydia felt her legs give out. She sat down hard on the floor and put her head in her hands. They'd done it. Against all odds, against the river and the storm and the impossible timeline, they'd done it. Rowan sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Neither of them spoke. They just sat there, breathing, alive. The celebration that night was muted but genuine. The settlement gathered in Tom's barn, the only structure large enough to hold everyone. Someone had brought out a fiddle. Children ran wild, burning off the tension of the past days. Sarah slept peacefully in a corner, watched over by her mother and Dr. Marcus. Lydia stood at the edge of the gathering, watching. She was too tired to join in, too wrung out to do anything but observe. Rowan found her there. "You should eat something," he said, offering bread and cheese. "Not hungry?" "You haven't eaten in 2 days." "Still not hungry." He set the food down anyway, stood beside her in comfortable silence. Then, "They're talking about you." Lydia glanced at the settlers. They were indeed looking her way, whispering. "Let me guess. Wondering what kind of woman rides through a blizzard for someone else's child. Wondering what kind of woman they're lucky enough to have living among them." She snorted. "That's generous." "It's true." Rowan turned to face her. "You know what I heard today? 3 different people asked me when the Duchess would start lessons again. Not your wife or the exile. The Duchess. They see you as I should have seen you from the beginning." "As what?" "As someone worth following." Before Lydia could respond, a commotion near the barn door made everyone turn. Lord Garrett stood there, flanked by a dozen armed men. The music stopped. Conversation died. Every eye in the room fixed on the Duke's council member. Garrett's face was carved from stone. "Your Grace, we need to speak. Now." They moved outside. The settlers followed, clustering at the barn entrance. "What is this?" Rowan's voice was dangerously quiet. "This is an intervention." Garrett gestured to his men. "The council has been patient, Your Grace. We've allowed this experiment to continue far longer than was wise. But it's over now." "Is it?" "Lord Ashford has filed a formal complaint with the regional magistrate. He's accusing you of harboring fugitive tenants and threatening violence against his lawful representatives." Garrett's expression was grim. "The magistrate has summoned you to answer charges. If you don't appear, you'll be held in contempt. The duchy could be forfeit." Silence. Cold and absolute. "When?" Rowan asked. 3 days. In the capital." Garrett moved closer. "Your Grace, this has gone too far. Your absence has created chaos. Trade agreements are failing. Our borders are vulnerable. And now you're making enemies of neighboring lords over a handful of farmers? Those farmers are under my protection. Those farmers are bleeding your resources and your reputation. And for what? A doomed marriage to a woman who—" Garrett stopped, seemed to reconsider his words. "Finish that sentence," Lydia said quietly. She stepped forward, drawing every eye. "A woman who what?" Garrett's jaw worked. "A woman who has no place in ducal affairs. Who was exiled for good reason and should have stayed exiled. I was exiled on false charges." "So you say, but the letters were written by my father without my knowledge. Your Duke investigated and found me innocent. Ask him yourself." Garrett looked at Rowan, who nodded once. "Even so," Garrett continued, "the fact remains, you have no training, no family connections worth maintaining, nothing to offer the duchy except what I've built here." Well, Lydia gestured at the settlement. "These people were struggling when I arrived. Now they have a school, medical care, a community that actually functions. I've done more for your Duke's lands in 6 months than you've done in 6 years." Garrett's face flushed. "You're a teacher playing at importance. The moment real trouble comes, real political pressure, you'll crumble." "You want to see me crumble?" Lydia's voice went cold. "Then watch." She turned to Rowan. "Go to the capital. Answer their charges. Do what you have to do." "Lydia, I mean it. You have responsibilities, a duchy to run, people who depend on you." She met his eyes. "I'm not asking you to choose. I'm telling you to do your duty." "And you?" "I'll stay here. Keep the settlement running. Keep teaching. Keep doing what needs doing." She smiled, small and fierce. "Someone has to." Rowan looked like she'd struck him. "You're asking me to leave you again." "I'm telling you that I can stand on my own, that I don't need you here every second to prove I matter." Her voice softened. "But I'd like you to come back when it's done. If you want to." "If I—" Rowan's voice cracked. "There's no if. I'll come back." "Then go, and come back. It's that simple." It wasn't simple at all, and they both knew it. Garrett cleared his throat. "Your Grace, we need to leave tonight if we're to make the capital in time." Rowan ignored him. He cupped Lydia's face in his hands, heedless of the watching crowd. "I love you," he said, clear and loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm in love with you, and when I come back, I'm going to ask you to be my wife. Not in name only this time. Actually, truly mine." Lydia's breath caught. "Rowan? You don't have to answer now. You said you needed time. Take it. Take as much as you need." His thumb brushed her cheek. "But know that I'm coming back. No matter what the council says, no matter what the magistrate decides, I'm coming back to you." Then he kissed her. Not gentle, not tentative. A kiss that laid claim and made promises and said everything words couldn't. When he pulled back, the entire settlement was staring. Rowan turned to Garrett. "Let's go, Tuts." They rode out into the darkness. Lydia watched until they disappeared, then turned back to the barn. Every settler was looking at her, measuring, judging. "Well," Mrs. Chen said finally, "that was quite a declaration." "He's dramatic," Lydia managed. "He's in love." The old woman smiled. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Lydia looked around at the faces watching her. Her students, the families she'd helped, the community she'd built from nothing. "I'm going to keep going," she said. "Same as always. Teach the children. Help where I'm needed. Wait for him to come back." "And if he doesn't?" The question hit like a punch, but Lydia lifted her chin. "Then I'll keep going anyway, because I'm not doing this for him. I'm doing it for them." She gestured at the children peeking around their parents' legs. "For people who need someone to believe in them. And I don't need a duke to do that." Mrs. Chen's smile widened. "Now that's the woman we need." The settlers returned to their celebration, but Lydia stayed outside, watching the path Rowan had taken. 3 days until the magistrate's hearing. 3 days to wonder if he'd keep his promise, if the duchy would swallow him whole again, if she'd made a terrible mistake by letting him go. Behind her, the barn door opened. Mara slipped out. "Miss Lydia? Are you sad?" Lydia looked down at her student, at this bright, curious girl who'd been one of the first to trust her. "No," she said truthfully. "I'm scared, but not sad." "What's the difference?" "Sad is when you've lost something. Scared is when you're waiting to find out if you will." She took Mara's hand. "Come on, let's go back inside." They returned to the celebration. Lydia let herself be pulled into the dancing, let the music and warmth wrap around her, and tried not to think about the fact that somewhere in the darkness, Rowan was riding away from her. Again. Nah. The attack came on the second night. Lydia woke to screaming. She grabbed her shawl and ran outside. The settlement was chaos, people running, someone shouting about fire, children crying. Then she saw them. Men on horseback carrying torches. A dozen at least, their faces covered. Lord Ashford's men. It had to be. They were setting fires, barns, homes, anywhere that would burn. The settlers fought back, but they were farmers, not fighters. Lydia ran toward Mrs. Chen's house. The old woman was trying to save her herb stores, hauling baskets through smoke. "Leave it!" Lydia grabbed her arm. "We need to get everyone to safety." An explosion cut her off. One of the barns, the one where they'd celebrated just hours ago, went up in a fireball. The heat knocked Lydia back. She hit the ground hard, ears ringing. When she looked up, a rider was bearing down on her. She rolled aside just in time. Hooves thundered past, missing her by inches. The rider wheeled around, pulling a sword. Lydia scrambled to her feet. No weapons. No help nearby. Just her and a man who clearly meant to hurt her. The rider raised his sword. A gunshot split the air. The rider jerked, then fell from his horse. Lydia spun. Tom's father stood there, an ancient musket smoking in his hands. "Get to the river!" he shouted. "Everyone to the river!" The settlers mobilized. They'd planned for this, discussed what to do if raiders came. The river was their fallback, a place they could defend. Lydia helped shepherd people through the smoke and chaos, counted heads, made sure no one was left behind. Then she realized. Sarah, Dr. Marcus. They'd been in the Henderson house, away from the main settlement. She ran. The Henderson house was surrounded by 3 riders. Inside, she could hear Sarah screaming. Lydia didn't think. She grabbed a fallen branch, thick and heavy, and charged. She swung at the nearest rider's leg, connected hard enough to make him howl and fall. The other 2 turned on her. Run! Dr. Marcus appeared in the doorway, Sarah in his arms. I have her! Run! Lydia ran. The riders followed. She led them away from the doctor and the child, toward the forest. Branches whipped her face. Roots tried to trip her. Behind her, hooves pounded. She wasn't going to make it. The riders were too fast, the forest too dark. Then the ground disappeared beneath her feet. She was falling, tumbling down a slope she hadn't seen. Rocks and roots battered her. She hit the bottom hard and lay there, stunned. Above, she heard horses, shouting, the riders looking for her. She stayed absolutely still. After an eternity, they moved on. Lydia tried to stand. Pain lanced through her leg, twisted ankle at best, broken at worst. She was alone, injured, in the dark, and the settlement was burning. She started crawling back up the slope. It took her an hour to reach the settlement. Every movement was agony. Her hands were torn and bleeding. Her ankle screamed with each step. But she made it. The fires were out. The settlers had organized, saved what they could. But the damage was extensive. 3 homes destroyed, 2 barns, most of the winter supplies. Mrs. Chen found her limping through the wreckage. Merciful, where have you been? We thought... She saw Lydia's condition and swore. Sit, now. Sarah is fine. Doctor. Marcus got her out. You saved them. Mrs. Chen started examining Lydia's ankle. Badly sprained. You won't be walking on this for days. Around them, the settlers gathered. Their faces were drawn, scared. What do we do? Someone asked. They'll come back. Lord Ashford won't stop until... Until what? Lydia cut in. Until he's driven us all away? Taken back the people who fled his cruelty? She struggled to her feet despite Mrs. Chen's protests. We don't run. We rebuild. With what? Tom's father gestured at the destruction. Half our food stores are gone, winter supplies burned, and Ashford's proven he's willing to kill to get what he wants. Then we fight back. Everyone stared at her. How? Someone asked. We're farmers. We document everything, Lydia said. Every attack, every threat, every law Ashford breaks. We gather evidence. And when the Duke returns from the capital, we hand him a case so airtight the magistrate can't ignore it. You think they'll care? We're nobodies. You're ducal subjects, under ducal protection. And the law... Lydia took a breath, forcing her voice steady. The law says that attacking you is attacking the Duke himself. Ashford just committed an act of war. The words settled over the crowd. You really think the Duke will fight for us? Mrs. Chen asked quietly. Risk everything for a settlement that's more trouble than it's worth? Lydia thought about Rowan, about the way he'd looked at her before he left, about promises made and kisses that tasted like forever. Yes, she said, I do. She hoped she was right. The next day, riders came from the capital. Not Rowan, not Garrett. Official magistrate's men carrying a sealed letter. Mrs. Chen read it aloud to the gathered settlers, her voice flat. By order of the regional magistrate, all persons claiming residence on Hale lands formerly under Lord Ashford's tenancy are to present themselves for arbitration within 7 days. Failure to comply will result in forcible removal and criminal charges. Silence. It's a trap, Tom's father said. We show up for arbitration and they arrest us all. Or worse. Another settler shook his head. This is Ashford's doing. He bought the magistrate. We don't know that, Lydia started. Don't we? Mrs. Chen's face was grim. Rich lord versus frontier farmers? There's no world where that arbitration is fair. The crowd murmured agreement. Fear was turning to resignation. Lydia could see it happening, the slow collapse of hope. Then we don't go, she said. Everyone turned. We stay here, on ducal land, under ducal protection, and we wait for the Duke to return and handle this properly. And if he doesn't return, someone asked, what if the council convinced him to wash his hands of us? The question hung in the air. What if Rowan didn't come back? What if this really was too much trouble, too much political complication? What if Lydia had bet everything on a man who'd already abandoned her once? Before she could answer, a shout went up from the settlement's edge. Riders, coming fast! Everyone scrambled for weapons. After last night, no one was taking chances. But when the riders emerged from the tree line, Lydia's heart stopped. Rowan, leading 20 armed men, riding hard. He pulled up in the settlement square and dismounted before his horse had fully stopped. His eyes found Lydia immediately. What happened? I saw the smoke from miles away. Then he saw her ankle, her torn hands, the bruises on her face. His expression went deadly. Who did this? Lydia opened her mouth to answer, but Mrs. Chen beat her to it. Ashford's men came in the night, burned homes, destroyed supplies. They were looking for the refugee families. Rowan's jaw clenched so hard Lydia thought she heard teeth crack. He turned to his men. Find everyone who is hurt. Get me a full damage report. Now. The men scattered. Rowan moved to Lydia, his hands gentle despite the rage in his eyes. Can you walk? It's just a sprain. He swept her up before she could finish, carried her toward her cottage like she weighed nothing. I'm fine, she protested. You're not fine, you're hurt, because I left you. His voice was raw. I left you, and Ashford attacked, and you… He couldn't finish. Inside the cottage, he set her down carefully on the bed. Then he knelt in front of her and pressed his forehead to her knee. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have left more men, should have anticipated… Stop! Lydia put her hand in his hair. You're here now. I'm here now, he repeated, and I'm not leaving again. Not for the council, not for the magistrate, not for anyone. He looked up at her, and his eyes were fierce. They wanted me to choose the duchy or you, political stability or this settlement. And I chose. Chose what? Everything. Rowan stood, pulled a folded document from his coat. I went to the capital, faced the magistrate, and I presented evidence of Ashford's illegal rent increases, his violation of tenant rights, his destruction of property. Then I formally annexed this settlement as a protected ducal territory under direct governance. He handed her the document. It was covered in official seals. This settlement is now legally mine. Anyone attacking it is attacking me personally, and Ashford, Rowan's smile was knife-sharp, is facing charges of assault against a duke. The magistrate had no choice but to issue a warrant. Lydia stared at the paper. You did this in 3 days? I had motivation. He cupped her face. The council told me to choose between duty and you, like they were separate things, but they're not. You are my duty. These people are my duty. And if that makes me a bad duke, then I'll be a bad duke who actually protects his people instead of a good one who lets them burn. Tears spilled down Lydia's cheeks. What about the duchy? The trade agreements? The politics? I have good people handling it. People I should have trusted more. And the parts I can't delegate. He shrugged. I'll handle them from here. Build a secondary seat of power. Make this settlement into something real. A town, eventually. A place that matters. You're going to stay. I'm going to stay. He leaned closer. If you'll have me. Not as the Duke slumming it with farmers. As Rowan. Just Rowan. Building a life with you. Lydia's hands were shaking. I'm still angry at you, for the exile, for everything. That doesn't just go away. I know. And I still don't know if I can trust you completely. I know that too. But She took a shaky breath. I think I'm falling in love with you. Actually, truly. Not despite what you did, but because of who you're becoming. And that terrifies me. Rowan's expression broke open. Say that again. Which part? The part where you're falling in love with me. I think I'm falling in love with you, she repeated, stronger this time. I think I have been for weeks. I just didn't want to admit it because… He kissed her, deep and desperate and full of promises neither of them had words for. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Lydia said, We're going to have to tell the settlement about us, about what this means. Let them talk. They'll have opinions. They can keep them. Rowan smiled. I've spent 8 years caring what people think. I'm done. Someone cleared their throat from the doorway. Mrs. Chen stood there, arms crossed, wearing an expression that was half exasperated, half amused. As heartwarming as this is, she said, we have a settlement to rebuild and a magistrate's summons to deal with. So if you two are finished making declarations, we are, Rowan said. Good, because Lord Ashford's not going to take his arrest warrant well. He'll fight back. Mrs. Chen's face went serious. This isn't over. It's just beginning. Lydia and Rowan looked at each other. Then we fight, Lydia said. Together, Rowan added. Mrs. Chen nodded. Together. Now get up, both of you. We have work to do. They followed her out into the cold morning light, into a settlement scarred but standing, into a future uncertain and dangerous and theirs. And for the first time since her wedding night, Lydia felt something she'd thought she'd lost forever. Hope, Lydia learned over the next week, was exhausting work. The settlement rebuilt in pieces, one wall at a time, one roof beam after another. Rowan worked alongside the farmers, hauling timber and hammering nails until his hands bled. His 20 men integrated into the community, taking guard shifts and helping with repairs. But the threat lingered like smoke. Ashford's arrest warrant had only made him more dangerous. His men prowled the borders of Hale Land, testing for weaknesses. Twice, scouts spotted armed groups approaching before they melted back into the forest. They were waiting for something. Lydia just didn't know what. She sat in her cottage on the 7th day, her ankle finally healed enough to bear weight, reviewing the evidence they'd compiled. Witness statements from the refugee families, documentation of Ashford's illegal practices, records of the attack complete with names and descriptions. It should have been enough, but should and would were different things. You're worrying again. Rowan appeared in the doorway, covered in sawdust. I'm always worrying. It's my natural state. He crossed to where she sat, leaned down, and kissed the top of her head. The casual intimacy of it still caught her off guard. The way he touched her now like he had the right to, like she was his and he was hers. Maybe they were. The magistrate's deputy arrives tomorrow, he said. He'll take statements, verify the evidence. It'll be fine. Will it? Lydia set down her papers. Ashford has money and connections. We have farmers and a duke who's making enemies of his own council by being here. I'm not making enemies, I'm clarifying priorities. Rowan sat beside her. And the deputy is Thomas Whitmore. I served with his brother in the border campaigns. He's honest. Honest men can still be pressured. Then we make sure the evidence is so compelling he can't ignore it even if he's pressured. Rowan took her hand. Have a little faith. Faith hasn't served me well in the past. Good thing you have me now. She wanted to argue, but he was smiling, that small, crooked smile that made her chest tight. And she found herself smiling back despite everything. A knock interrupted them. Tom's father stood at the door, his face grim. Your Grace, we found something. You need to see this. The discovery was in the western woods about a mile from the settlement. A camp. Recent, by the look of it. Fire pits still warm, tracks everywhere. And supplies. Lots of supplies. Rowan crouched by a stack of crates, pried one open. Inside, weapons. Swords, crossbows. Enough to arm 50 men. They're planning something big, Tom's father said. This isn't a raiding party. This is an army. Lydia's blood went cold. When? Soon. The tracks are fresh. They were here this morning. He pointed to markings on a tree. And look at this. Someone had carved a message into the bark. 3 days. Burn it all. Rowan stood slowly. They're going to attack during the magistrate's visit. Make it look like frontier violence, too chaotic for the law to handle. Then they'll swoop in, claim they're restoring order, and take the refugee families by force. Can we stop them? Lydia asked. With 20 men against 50? Rowan shook his head. Not an open battle. We'd be slaughtered. Then we don't fight open battle. Lydia stared at the cache of weapons. We use what we have, knowledge of the terrain, the element of surprise. We make them fight on our terms. Tom's father raised an eyebrow. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about survival. Same thing. They returned to the settlement and gathered everyone who could be trusted, about 30 people including Rowan's men. Lydia spread out a rough map she'd drawn of the area. They'll come from the west, she said, pointing. It's the easiest approach, the widest path. They'll expect us to fortify the settlement and wait. We won't? One of Rowan's soldiers asked. We can't. They outnumber us. So instead, Lydia traced a line on the map. We lead them into the ravine here. It's narrow, heavily wooded, perfect for ambush. Rowan studied the map. How do we get them to follow? We give them a target they can't resist. Lydia met his eyes. Me. The room erupted. Rowan's face went white. Absolutely not, he said. It's the only way that makes sense. They want to punish the settlement. What better way than capturing the Duchess who defied them? You're not using yourself as bait. I'm using myself as an asset. Lydia kept her voice level. They won't kill me immediately. I'm worth more alive as leverage. That gives us time to spring the trap. And if something goes wrong, if they don't follow the plan, then you adapt. Same as always. She touched his arm. This is the best chance we have. You know it is. Rowan looked like he wanted to argue, to forbid it, to lock her somewhere safe. But he was learning to trust her judgment even when it terrified him. I hate this, he said finally. I'm not thrilled about it either. Mrs. Chen cleared her throat. If we're doing this insane thing, we need to prepare, set the ambush properly, and someone needs to warn the magistrate's deputy what he's riding into. I'll send a rider tonight, Rowan said. Fast horse, back roads. He should reach the deputy before... Before what? A new voice cut in. Everyone turned. A man stood in the doorway, middle-aged, well-dressed, wearing the magistrate's seal. Thomas Whitmore had arrived early. Cheat. Lydia watched Rowan's face go through several emotions before settling on grim determination. Deputy Whitmore, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow. I made good time. Whitmore stepped inside, his eyes taking in the gathered crowd, the map, the obvious war council. What's this about a trap? There was a beat of silence. Then Rowan made a decision. Lord Ashford is planning to attack this settlement in 3 days. We just found his staging camp. Whitmore's expression didn't change. That's a serious accusation. It's a fact. I can show you the evidence. Please do. They spent the next hour presenting everything. The witness statements, the documentation of Ashford's crimes, the cache of weapons in the woods. Whitmore listened without interrupting, his face impossible to read. Finally, he sat back. This is damning. If it's accurate. It's accurate, Lydia said. Whitmore's gaze shifted to her, assessing, sharp. You're the Duchess, the one who was exiled. I am. And now you're, what, leading a frontier settlement? Planning military operations? I'm doing what needs to be done. She's kept these people alive, Mrs. Chen added, taught their children, saved lives, while Lord Ashford was busy destroying them. Whitmore was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm going to need to see this weapons cache, and I want to interview the refugee families directly. If what you're saying is true, this goes beyond simple tenant disputes. This is attempted murder and treason. And if Ashford attacks while you're here, Rowan asked, then he'll be attacking a magistrate's deputy, which would be, Whitmore smiled thinly, unwise. They moved the plan forward. With Whitmore's presence, they had legitimate authority to act. But it also meant they had to be smarter. No room for mistakes that could be twisted into the settlement acting as aggressors. Lydia worked with Rowan's soldiers, planning the ambush down to the smallest detail. Who would be where? What signals to use? How to minimize casualties while maximizing the trap's effectiveness. Sarah appeared while they were working, her small face still pale, but determined. Miss Lydia, can I help? Lydia looked down at the girl she'd ridden through a blizzard to save. You should be resting. I'm rested, and I want to help. These are bad men trying to hurt us, right? Yes. Then I want to do something. Sarah's jaw set stubbornly. You saved me. Let me help save everyone else. Lydia glanced at Rowan, who shrugged. She has your spirit. In the end, Sarah and the other children became runners, carrying messages between positions, too small and quick for enemies to catch. It wasn't combat, but it was useful, and it gave them purpose beyond fear. Night fell. Tomorrow Whitmore would take his formal statements. The day after, they'd set the trap. And the day after that... Lydia tried not to think about the day after that. She found Rowan on the cottage porch, staring into the darkness. Can't sleep? She asked. Thinking. About? About how I'm sending you into danger again. How I keep putting you in positions where you might die, and I'm powerless to stop it. Lydia sat beside him. You're not sending me anywhere. I'm choosing this. That doesn't make it easier. It's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be right. She took his hand. And this is right. We protect these people. We stop Ashford. We prove that the frontier isn't lawless chaos. It's a community worth defending. When did you get so good at speeches? I've been practicing. Had a lot of time to think while you were gone. Rowan turned to face her. I meant what I said before. When this is over, when Ashford is dealt with and the settlement is safe, I'm going to ask you to marry me again. Properly this time. We're already married. That was a contract. This would be a choice. His voice went soft. I want you to choose me. Not because you're obligated or because circumstances forced you. Because you want to. Lydia's throat tightened. And if I say no? Then I'll ask again tomorrow. And the day after. Until either you say yes or tell me to stop asking. That's not how proposals work. I don't care how they're supposed to work. I care about you. He cupped her face. I love you. Completely. Inconveniently. Forever. And I need you to know that before I walk into danger tomorrow? Yes. Lydia leaned into his touch. I love you too. I don't know when it happened exactly. Maybe when you chopped wood for strangers. Maybe when you jumped into that river. Maybe it's been growing since the moment you looked at me in that burned wagon and chose people over pride. She kissed him softly. But I do. Love you, even though you're dramatic and stubborn and make terrible decisions. Those are your favorite things about me. They really are. They sat together in the darkness, holding each other, stealing moments of peace before the storm. Whitmore spent the next day taking statements. He was thorough, professional, and by late afternoon visibly angry. This is worse than I thought, he told Rowan and Lydia privately. Ashford's been systematically exploiting his tenants for years. The refugee families. They're not isolated cases. There are dozens more still trapped on his lands. Can you stop him? Lydia asked. I can issue a warrant. Bring charges. But executing it? Whitmore shook his head. Ashford has private guards, fortified estates. Without military support, arresting him would be suicide. What if he came to you, say, Rowan said. What if he committed a crime so blatant you had no choice but to act immediately? You mean your ambush plan? I mean defending this settlement from an illegal attack, with a magistrate's deputy present as witness. Whitmore considered this. If Ashford attacks with me here, I could arrest him on the spot for assaulting an officer of the Crown. The regional court would have to act. Exactly. You're using me as bait too. We're all bait, Lydia said. Bait. The question is whether you're willing to be bait with teeth. Whitmore almost smiled. Your Duchess is terrifying, Your Grace. You have no idea, Rowan said, but he was looking at Lydia with something close to pride. The trap was set before dawn. Rowan's soldiers positioned themselves in the ravine, 10 on each side, hidden in the trees. Tom's father and 5 others blocked the far exit. The children waited at designated spots with their messages ready, and Lydia stood in a clearing at the ravine's entrance, visible and alone. The bait. Rowan had wanted to stay with her. She'd refused. The ambush only worked if she looked vulnerable, and a Duke standing guard ruined that illusion. So she waited. Minutes felt like hours. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist. Then she heard them. Horses. Lots of horses. They emerged from the tree line, 40 men, maybe more, heavily armed. Lord Ashford himself led them, his face twisted with rage. He pulled up short when he saw her. The infamous Duchess, he called, standing in the open like a fool. Where's your husband? Where are your guards? Gone, Lydia said, loud enough to carry. Abandoned the settlement. Decided it wasn't worth the trouble. It was a lie. A transparent one. But men like Ashford wanted to believe the worst about people. So you're here alone. How convenient. Ashford gestured to his men. Take her. Burn everything else. This was the moment. The point where everything could go wrong. Lydia turned and ran toward the ravine exactly as planned. Behind her, Ashford's men gave chase. She was fast, but they were faster. Mounted, armored. She made it to the ravine entrance and kept running. Heard the horses thunder after her. Felt the trap closing around them. Then she hit the ground as Rowan's whistle split the air. Chaos erupted. The soldiers dropped from the trees, blocking both exits. Arrows flew, men shouted, horses screamed and reared. Ashford's forces found themselves trapped in a narrow space, unable to maneuver, surrounded on all sides. "Stand down!" Whitmore's voice boomed. He appeared on horseback, wearing his official robes, flanked by Rowan. "By authority of the regional magistrate, you are all under arrest for assault, attempted murder, and attacking a settlement under ducal protection." Ashford's face went purple. "This is a setup." "This is justice." Rowan's voice was cold. "You attacked first. We defended. And you did it with a magistrate's deputy watching." He smiled. "Congratulations. You've just committed treason." For a moment it looked like Ashford might fight anyway. His hand went to his sword. Then Tom's father fired a warning shot that ricocheted off a rock by Ashford's horse. "Don't," the farmer said. "We've got you surrounded. We've got witnesses. You've already lost." The truth of it settled over Ashford's men. One by one, they dropped their weapons. Ashford himself sat rigid on his horse, staring at Lydia with pure hatred. "This isn't over," he hissed. "Yes," Lydia said, standing and brushing dirt from her clothes. "It is." The arrest took hours. Whitmore's men, he'd brought reinforcements, it turned out, waiting just out of sight, processed each of Ashford's soldiers, took statements, confiscated weapons. Ashford himself was bound and placed under guard. He hurled threats and curses the entire time. Lydia watched it all from a distance, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Mrs. Chen appeared beside her with a cup of something hot. "Drink, before you fall over." "I'm fine." "You're in shock." "Drink anyway." Lydia drank. The liquid burned, some kind of herbal concoction that tasted medicinal and felt like fire. "That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen," Mrs. Chen said, "running toward armed men like that." "It worked. It could have gotten you killed." "But it didn't." Lydia set down the cup. "Is everyone accounted for? No one hurt?" "2 minor injuries, nothing serious." Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "You did it. You actually did it. Took down a lord with nothing but farmers and a plan." "We took down a lord, all of us." "Don't be modest. This was your idea. Your leadership." The old woman paused. "The settlement wants to make it official, name you as their representative, give you actual authority here." Lydia blinked. "What?" "You heard me. They want you to speak for them, officially, to the magistrate, to the duke, to anyone who'll listen." Mrs. Chen smiled. "Turns out people like having someone who'll run into danger for them. Makes them loyal." Before Lydia could respond, Rowan found her. He pulled her into his arms without a word, just held her tight enough that she could feel his heart racing. "Don't ever do that again," he said into her hair. "Do what?" "Win." "Use yourself as bait. I aged 10 years watching you run toward those men." "But it worked." "I don't care. Find a different strategy next time." Lydia pulled back enough to see his face. "There won't be a next time. Ashford's arrested. It's over. This part is over. But there will be other challenges, other threats." Rowan's eyes were serious. The council isn't going to like how this played out. And there are other lords like Ashford, men who exploit their people and call it proper management. Then we deal with them too, one at a time. "We?" "We." Lydia took his hand. "You didn't think I was letting you handle this alone, did you? You're terrible at politics." "I'm adequate at politics." "You threatened to fight the entire council last week." "They deserved it." Lydia laughed, real laughter, bubbling up from relief and exhaustion and the sheer absurdity of it all. "We're a disaster together." "The best kind of disaster." Rowan kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her mouth. "I love you." "Have I mentioned that recently?" "Not in the last hour." "Unacceptable. I love you. You're brilliant and terrifying and—" "Your Grace," one of Whitmore's men called out. "The deputy needs you. There's a complication with Ashford's arrest." They hurried over. Ashford was arguing with Whitmore, his voice rising. "Cannot be held accountable for protecting my property. These people are criminals, squatters on land that's rightfully— They're refugees fleeing illegal exploitation," Whitmore cut in. "And they're now under formal ducal protection, which you knew when you attacked." I was exercising my rights as, you have no rights here. Rowan's voice was ice. This is my land. These are my people, and you attacked them. That's not a property dispute. That's an act of war. Ashford's face twisted. You can't prove intent. I can claim I was confused about borders that I believed. You carved burn it all into a tree, Lydia said. We have the evidence. We have witnesses. And we have a magistrate's deputy who watched you attack a settlement while shouting explicit threats. My lawyers will... Your lawyers will fail. Whitmore's voice was flat. I'm taking you to the capital for trial, and I'm recommending the Crown seize your lands pending investigation into systematic tenant abuse. Ashford went white. You can't... The other lords won't allow... The other lords don't have a choice. You attacked a duke, assaulted a magistrate's officer, committed treason in front of dozens of witnesses. Whitmore gestured to his men. Take him away. As they dragged Ashford toward the prison wagon, he looked back at Lydia. This isn't finished, he spat. You think you've won, but people like you, frontier trash playing at nobility, you don't belong. The system will crush you eventually. Lydia met his gaze steadily. The system just arrested you. I think I'll take my chances. They locked him away. The sound of the wagon door slamming shut echoed across the settlement. That night, the celebration was genuine. Someone had found fiddles and drums. The settlers danced in the square they'd rebuilt, their children running wild, the fear of the past weeks finally breaking. Lydia sat with Rowan on the edge of it all, watching. They want me to be their official representative, she said. Did Mrs. Chen tell you? She did. Are you going to accept? I don't know. It feels like a lot of responsibility. You've been handling that responsibility for months. This just makes it official. What about you? What does the Duke think about his wife becoming a frontier leader? Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then, the Duke thinks his wife should do whatever makes her happy. If that's leading this settlement, teaching these children, building something new, then that's what she should do. And if that means staying here, instead of going back to the estate, then we stay here, together. He turned to face her. I told you before, I'd give up the duchy for you. I meant it. But I'm starting to think I don't have to choose. We can build something better. A duchy that actually serves its people instead of exploiting them. Starting here. Lydia's heart was racing. That's ambitious. You're ambitious. I'm just trying to keep up. She laughed. Is this the part where you propose again? Is this the part where you'd say yes? The question hung between them. Around them, the settlement celebrated. Children laughed. Music played. People who'd been strangers 6 months ago now felt like family. Lydia looked at Rowan, this complicated, damaged man who'd exiled her and then refused to leave, who'd learned to trust when trust was terrifying, who'd chosen people over power and love over pride. Ask me, she said. Rowan stood, pulling her up with him. Then, in front of the entire settlement, he dropped to one knee. The music stopped. Conversation died. Everyone turned to stare. Lydia Everhart Hale, Rowan said, his voice carrying across the square. You are the strongest, bravest, most stubborn person I've ever met. You've survived exile, winter, attacks, and being married to me. You've built a community from nothing and taught me what it means to actually protect people instead of just ruling them. He pulled out a ring, simple silver, nothing fancy. I'm asking you to marry me again. Not as a political contract or because circumstances force us, but because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life learning to be worthy of you. Lydia's vision blurred. You're already worthy. Is that a yes? She dropped to her knees too, taking his face in her hands. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Again, properly this time. He kissed her as the settlement erupted in cheers. When they finally broke apart, Sarah was tugging on Lydia's sleeve. Does this mean you're staying? You're not going to leave us? Lydia pulled the girl into a hug. I'm staying. We both are. This is home now. Sarah beamed and ran off to tell the other children. Rowan helped Lydia to her feet. The ring slid onto her finger, a perfect fit. Home, he repeated. I like the sound of that. Good, because you're stuck with it, with me, with all of this. Lydia gestured at the settlement, the people, the life they'd built. Best decision I ever made, Rowan said. They rejoined the celebration, danced with the settlers, accepted congratulations and well wishes. Somewhere around midnight, Whitmore approached. "I'll be leaving at dawn," he said, taking Ashford and his men to the capital. "But I wanted to say, what you've built here, it's remarkable, both of you." "Just doing what needed to be done," Lydia said. "That's what makes it remarkable." Whitmore handed Rowan an official-looking document. "This is temporary governance authorization. It gives you legal authority to administer this settlement as an official ducal territory. You'll need to formalize it with the crown eventually, but this should hold until then." Rowan scanned the document. "This is more authority than most lords get. You've proven you'll use it properly. That's rare." Whitmore turned to Lydia. "And this is for you, official recognition as the settlement's chosen representative. It's not a title exactly, but it gives you standing in regional matters." Lydia took the paper with shaking hands. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep fighting for these people, for the refugees still trapped under lords like Ashford, for a system that actually works." Whitmore smiled. "The frontier needs people like you, both of you." He left them standing there, holding documents that changed everything. "We did it," Lydia said softly. "Actually did it." "We survived," Rowan corrected. "That's different from winning." "Is it?" "Ashford's arrested. The refugees are safe. The settlement has legal protection. Sounds like winning to me." "It's the beginning of winning. The hard part comes next, actually building something lasting, making sure this isn't just one settlement that got lucky, but the start of real change." Lydia leaned against him. "One step at a time. Tonight, we celebrate. Tomorrow, we plan. The day after, we get married. Again. Properly." Rowan wrapped his arms around her. "And then we change the world." "That's ambitious." "You're ambitious. I'm just trying to keep up." Lydia laughed, the sound bright and free. Around them, the settlement celebrated into the night. Children slept in corners. Adults danced and sang. The fires burned warm and steady. And for the first time since her wedding night, the real one, the one that had ended in exile, Lydia felt complete. Not because she'd been rescued, not because a man had fixed everything, but because she'd saved herself. Built something from nothing. Proven that the girl who'd been thrown away was actually someone worth believing in. The rest, Rowan, the settlement, the future they were building, was just the reward for refusing to break. The rest, Rowan, the settlement, the future they were building, was just the reward for refusing to break. But rewards, Lydia learned over the next 3 weeks, came with complications. The first complication arrived in the form of Rowan's council, all 12 of them, riding into the settlement like an invading force. Lord Garrett led them, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. Lydia was teaching when they appeared. She looked up from helping Mara with her letters to find the council members dismounting in the square, their expensive clothes and polished boots absurdly out of place among the rough-hewn buildings. "This should be interesting," Mrs. Chen muttered from where she was grinding herbs nearby. Garrett spotted Rowan hauling timber for the new schoolhouse they were building. The council member's expression went from furious to scandalized. "Your Grace, what in the name of, you're doing manual labor?" Rowan set down the beam carefully. "Good morning, Garrett. Gentlemen, wasn't expecting you." "Clearly," Garrett gestured at the settlement, "we've come to discuss the magistrate's report, and the rather alarming rumors that you've been—" He seemed to struggle for words. "Living here. Permanently. Not rumors, facts." Rowan walked over, sawdust covering his clothes. "Welcome to Hale's Reach. That's what we're calling it now." "Hale's Reach," Garrett's voice dripped disdain. "You've named a frontier settlement after yourself?" "The settlers named it, actually. I just approved it." Another council member stepped forward, Lord Perth, the duchy's trade minister. "Your Grace, we need to speak privately about your duties, your responsibilities. Anything you need to say can be said here." Rowan crossed his arms. "These people are my subjects. They have a right to hear what concerns my council." The council members exchanged glances. Finally, Garrett said, "Very well, the magistrate's report states that you've formally annexed this settlement as a ducal territory, that you've granted refugee status to former Ashford tenants, that you've allocated significant resources to infrastructure development here." He paused. and that you're planning to establish this as a permanent seat of governance. Is that accurate? Completely accurate. Have you lost your mind? The bluntness of it made several settlers gasp, but Rowan just smiled, cold and sharp. My mind is clearer than it's ever been. This settlement produces more loyalty per acre than half the duchy combined. These people work harder, waste less, and actually appreciate what they're given. Why wouldn't I invest here? Because it's a frontier backwater with no strategic value. It has the most strategic value possible. It proves that ducal protection means something, that people can come to my lands and be safe, that I actually care about more than tax revenue. Rowan's voice hardened, which is apparently a radical concept. Lord Perth tried a different approach. Your Grace, we understand you feel strongly about this, but the practical reality is that you cannot govern the entire duchy from a settlement 4 hours from the estate. The infrastructure alone, I've been governing quite well from here for 3 weeks. You've managed fine without me hovering. We've been managing crises without your input. The Merchant Guild is demanding audience. The border lords are making territorial claims. Our trade agreements with the southern provinces are about to expire, and we have no one authorized to renegotiate. Then I'll authorize you. That's why I have a council. Garrett's face went red. You can't simply delegate everything and abdicate your actual responsibilities. I'm not abdicating anything. I'm expanding, building a new model of governance. Rowan gestured at the settlement. Look around. These people have been here less than a year, and they've created something sustainable. They educate their children, care for their sick, defend their own. When's the last time you could say that about the estate villages? That's completely different. It's exactly the same. The only difference is I'm actually here, present, listening to what they need instead of assuming I know better. The argument was heating up. Settlers were gathering, watching the confrontation. Lydia could see the council members growing uncomfortable. They'd expected a private dressing down of their wayward duke, not a public debate. She stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. Time to intervene before this turned into something that damaged Rowan's position beyond repair. Gentlemen, she said, moving into the square, perhaps we could continue this discussion over a meal. You've ridden a long way. Every eye turned to her. Garrett's expression went through several emotions before settling on contemptuous dismissal. Duchess, how convenient. I was hoping to speak with you as well. Then speak. Very well, this settlement, this entire situation, it's built on your influence over the Duke. Everyone knows it. You've manipulated him into abandoning his true responsibilities in favor of playing at frontier reformation. Lydia felt the temperature drop. Around her, settlers bristled. Mrs. Chen's hand went to the knife she kept on her belt, but Lydia kept her voice level. Is that what you think? That I manipulated him? What else would you call it? A disgraced exile who somehow convinced her husband to upend centuries of tradition, to waste resources on farmers and refugees? Garrett moved closer. You're a liability. To the duchy, to the Duke's reputation, to everything we've built. And I'm formally recommending that His Grace annul this marriage and send you enough. Rowan's voice cut like a blade. He was beside Lydia in 3 strides, his face carved from ice. You will not speak to my wife that way. You will not question her integrity, and you sure as hell won't threaten her. I'm trying to save you from yourself. I don't need saving. I need a council that understands what I'm building here. Rowan's hands clenched. Lydia didn't manipulate me into anything. She showed me what leadership actually looks like. And if you can't see that, if all you see is a woman who's beneath her station, then maybe you're the liability. The square went silent. Even the children had stopped playing. Garrett's face was purple. Your Grace, if you continue down this path, I will have no choice but to petition the regional court for a competency review. The other lords will support me. Your own council will testify that you've abandoned your duties for what? For actually caring about people? For a woman who's twisted your judgment beyond recognition. Careful, Rowan said softly, dangerously. You're very close to a line you don't want to cross. I've already crossed it. Someone has to. Garrett turned to the other council members. Who stands with me? Who agrees that this madness has to end? 3 council members stepped forward. Not a majority, but enough to cause serious problems. Lydia's heart sank. This was it. The moment where Rowan would have to choose his counsel or her, his established power base or the new life they were building. She started to speak, to tell him it was okay, that he should go back. Rowan spoke first. Then you're dismissed, all three of you. His voice was flat, effective immediately. Collect your stipends and leave my service. Garrett's mouth fell open. You can't. I can. I am. You've made your position clear. You think I'm incompetent, that my wife is a manipulator, that this settlement is worthless. I don't need advisors who hold me in contempt. The other lords will never accept this. Then they can take it up with the crown. I'm the Duke of Hale. I decide who serves me. And I decide that people who insult my wife don't make the cut. Rowan looked at the remaining council members. Anyone else want to resign? They stayed silent. Good. Then here's what's happening. Hale's Reach is now an official ducal territory with full infrastructure support. I'm splitting my time between here and the estate, 2 weeks each location. We're implementing a new tenant policy across all duchy lands, fair rent, dispute resolution, and refugee protection. He paused. And my wife is now my official co-administrator. Any policies affecting settlements, education, or welfare go through her first. Lydia's breath caught. Rowan? Any objections? Rowan asked his remaining counsel. Lord Perth cleared his throat. Your Grace, no disrespect to the Duchess, but she has no formal training in governance. She's kept a frontier settlement alive through winter, fought off raiders, and organized a defense that took down a corrupt lord. That's better training than most nobles get in a lifetime. Rowan's voice was firm. She understands what our people actually need. That's worth more than any formal education. Another council member, Lady Chen, the duchy's financial advisor, spoke up. If I may, Your Grace, the magistrate's report mentioned that the Duchess organized medical care and education services with almost no budget. I'd actually like to learn her methods. Our estate villages could benefit. Lydia blinked. An ally. Unexpected but desperately needed. See, Rowan said, some people recognize competence when they see it. Garrett was shaking with rage. This is a disaster. You're throwing away everything for a better future, yes. Rowan's expression went cold. Now get off my land. You have an hour to be gone. The dismissed council members left, hurling threats and dire predictions. The remaining 9 stood in uncomfortable silence. Finally, Lord Perth said, Your Grace, we'll need time to adjust to these changes, but I think I speak for most of us when I say we're willing to try. If you truly believe this is the right path, I do, then we'll follow. Though I reserve the right to say I told you so if it fails spectacularly. Rowan almost smiled. Fair enough? The council members dispersed to examine the settlement, take stock of what had been built. Lydia stood in the square, processing what had just happened. Rowan had just restructured his entire governance for her, had fired 3 powerful nobles, had gambled his political future on a settlement most people considered worthless. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Yes, I did. They disrespected you, questioned your worth. I won't tolerate that. Not from anyone. You might have just started a civil war in your own duchy. Then we'll deal with it, together. He took her hand. I meant what I said. You're co-administrator now, equal partner in everything. I don't know how to do half the things that requires. Neither did I when I inherited. We'll learn. He kissed her forehead. Besides, you're better at this than you think. These people don't follow you because they have to. They follow because they want to. That's real power. The wedding happened 3 days later. Not the grand affair that dukes usually had, just a simple ceremony in the settlement square, witnessed by everyone who'd built this place from nothing. Lydia wore a dress the settlement women had sewn together, nothing fancy, but made with care and love. Rowan wore his best coat, though he'd refused the ducal regalia his remaining council tried to convince him to wear. This isn't about titles, he'd said. It's about us, Mrs. Chen officiated since the settlement had no formal clergy, and she was the closest thing they had to a spiritual leader. She kept it short and practical, the way frontier people did everything. Marriage is work, she told them. Anyone who tells you different is selling something. You're going to fight. You're going to disagree. There will be days you wonder why you did this. Encouraging, Lydia muttered. I'm not done. You'll also have days where you look at each other and think, I can't believe I get to do this life with you, where the work feels worth it because you're doing it together. Mrs. Chen smiled. Those days make the hard ones bearable. She turned to Rowan. Do you promise to treat this woman as your equal, to listen when she speaks, to value her judgment, and to never again mistake your fear for her failure? I do. Do you promise to build with her, not for her, to be her partner in all things, not her protector or her project? I do. Mrs. Chen turned to Lydia. Do you promise to trust him with your heart, even when it terrifies you? To believe in second chances, even when the first one hurt? Lydia's throat tightened. I do. Do you promise to keep being stubborn? To keep fighting for what's right even when it's hard? To never let anyone, including him, make you smaller than you are? I do. Then you're married. Again. Properly this time. Mrs. Chen stepped back. Someone kiss someone before I start crying. Rowan pulled Lydia close and kissed her. Not the desperate kisses from before. This was different, softer, full of promises and future and home. The settlement erupted in cheers. Later, after the celebration had faded and people drifted to their homes, Lydia and Rowan sat on their cottage porch. The cottage had grown, 2 rooms now, with a real bedroom and a workspace where Lydia could prepare lessons. Are you happy? Rowan asked. Lydia considered it. 6 months ago, she'd been a terrified bride being exiled to die. Now she was married to the same man, but everything was different. Yes, she said. I am. Are you? Happier than I thought possible. He took her hand. I keep thinking about who I was when we first married. How certain I was that I had to be hard, suspicious, alone. How wrong I was about everything. You weren't wrong about everything. You were just scared. I was terrified of being used, of being weak, of trusting the wrong person and losing everything. He looked at her. And then you showed me that trust isn't weakness, that being used is less painful than being alone, that losing everything matters less than having something worth losing. When did you get so philosophical? I've had a good teacher. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the settlement settle into night. Lights in windows, smoke from chimneys, the ordinary magic of people building lives. What happens now? Lydia asked. We've won. Ashford's arrested, the settlement's protected, we're married. What's the next battle? There's always a next battle, but maybe we've earned a moment to just be, to enjoy what we've built before we start building the next thing. You? Taking a break? That seems unlikely. I'm learning to pace myself. Another thing you taught me. Lydia leaned against him. We make a good team. The best. A figure approached through the darkness, Sarah, running despite the late hour. Miss Lydia! Miss Lydia! The girl was breathless. There's a rider from the capital. He says it's urgent. Lydia and Rowan exchanged glances. So much for their moment of peace. The rider was one of Whitmore's men, dust-covered and exhausted. Message from the deputy magistrate, he said, handing Rowan a sealed letter. He said you'd want to see this immediately. Rowan broke the seal and read. His expression went from concern to shocked to something Lydia couldn't identify. What is it? She asked. Ashford's trial was yesterday. Crown Court, full proceeding. Rowan looked up. He was found guilty on all charges. Treason, assault, tenant abuse. They're stripping his title and lands. That's good news, isn't it? It gets better. The Crown is redistributing his holdings. Some will be sold, some absorbed into neighboring territories. He paused. And some, the sections with the worst tenant situations, are being transferred to us, to Hale's Reach, as a test case for our new governance model. Lydia's mind reeled. How much land? About 3,000 acres, 12 villages, roughly 2,000 people, most of them refugees or near refugees from Ashford's policies. That's enormous. It's also a massive risk. Rowan's voice was measured. If we succeed, we prove that our model works, that reformation is possible. If we fail, we condemn 2,000 people to instability and give the Crown an excuse to impose stricter controls on all frontier territories. No pressure then. None at all. They looked at each other. This was it, the real test. Not surviving winter or defeating one corrupt lord, but actually building something that worked at scale. We'll need help, Lydia said. More teachers, more administrators. We'll have to visit each village, assess their needs. We'll need to train local leaders, people who understand their communities and can make decisions without waiting for approval from us. And we'll need to be careful. Other lords will be watching, waiting for us to fail so they can point to it as proof that change doesn't work. So we don't fail. Lydia laughed, a little hysterical, a little excited. Simple as that? Simple as that. Rowan pulled her close. We've survived everything else. We can survive success. The next 3 months were chaos. Good chaos, mostly, but still exhausting. They visited each of the new villages, listening to complaints and concerns, set up education programs, organized medical care, established dispute resolution councils run by locals instead of appointed nobles. Some villages embraced the changes eagerly. Others were suspicious, convinced this was some new scam by the nobility. Lydia lost count of how many times she had to prove herself. How many skeptical farmers needed to see her actually work before they'd trust her? How many women looked at her duchess title and assumed she'd never understand their lives? She proved them wrong, one village at a time, one conversation at a time. And slowly, things started to work. Crop yields improved when farmers weren't being bled by impossible rents. Children learned to read and started asking questions that made adults think differently. Communities that had been fractured by fear began to cooperate. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks, arguments. A village leader who tried to exploit the new system for personal gain and had to be removed. A crop failure that required emergency redistribution of supplies, but they handled it together. Rowan split his time between Hale's Reach and the estate, implementing the same reforms across his original holdings. Half his remaining council thought he was brilliant. The other half thought he was insane. Both were probably right. Lydia became the face of the new system. The duchess who'd been exiled and survived, who understood what it meant to have nothing and build from there. People listened to her in ways they didn't listen to Rowan. She was proof that the system could work for them, not just for nobles playing at reform. She gave speeches, mediated disputes, taught teachers who would teach others, worked herself to exhaustion, and then kept working. You need to rest, Mrs. Chen told her, after finding her asleep at her desk for the 3rd time in a week. I will. After we finish establishing the school in Milford. That's 4 weeks away. You'll be dead by then. Dramatic. Accurate. The old woman sat down. You've proven yourself, multiple times over. You don't have to work yourself to death to prove you deserve to be here. Don't I? Every village we add, there are people who think I'm just the Duke's wife playing at importance, that this will fall apart the moment he loses interest. Then they're fools, but you can't fix fools by destroying yourself. Mrs. Chen's voice softened. You've built something remarkable. Let other people help carry it. It was good advice. Lydia tried to follow it. Mostly. The real test came 6 months after they'd taken over Ashford's lands. A delegation arrived from the crown, not soldiers or magistrates, but observers, sent to evaluate whether the Hale Reformation model was working or if it needed to be shut down. They spent 2 weeks visiting villages, reviewing records, interviewing locals. Their leader was a stern woman named Lady Blackwood who had a reputation for brutal honesty and zero tolerance for nonsense. Lydia met with her in Hale's Reach's new council hall, a proper building now, with rooms for meetings and records. I've read the reports, Lady Blackwood said without preamble. Impressive numbers. Education rates up, crime down, tax revenue actually increasing despite lower individual rates. Your efficiency is remarkable. We have good people. You have motivated people, that's different. Lady Blackwood studied her. I'll be honest, Duchess. When I heard about this experiment, I expected to find a naive noblewoman playing at charity while bankrupting her husband's duchy. That's not what I found. What did you find? A functioning system, sustainable, scalable, and actually beneficial to both the people and the crown's interests. She paused. It shouldn't work. Every economic model says it shouldn't, but it does. Because we're not following economic models. We're following people. Explain. Lydia took a breath. Traditional governance treats people as assets, resources to be managed for maximum extraction. We're treating them as investments, Give them education, security, fair treatment. They produce more, waste less, and create their own solutions to problems. That's idealistic. That's practical. A farmer who isn't afraid of losing everything to unfair rent works harder and produces better crops. A child who can read grows into an adult who can innovate. People who feel valued in their community defend it instead of undermining it. Lydia leaned forward. It's not idealism. It's just recognizing that humans work better when they're not being exploited. Lady Blackwood was silent for a long moment. Then she smiled, small but genuine. I'm recommending the Crown expand this program. Offer other frontier lords the option to adopt your model. With support and oversight, of course. Lydia's heart jumped. You mean, I mean you've proven it works. Now we need to see if it can work elsewhere, with other leaders. Lady Blackwood stood. Congratulations, Duchess. You've just changed how the Crown thinks about frontier governance. After she left, Lydia sat alone in the council hall, trying to process what had just happened. They'd done it. Actually, genuinely done it. Taken an impossible situation and turned it into something the Crown wanted to replicate. Rowan found her there an hour later. Lady Blackwood told me her recommendation, he said. We won. We survived, Lydia corrected. Winning comes next, making sure this actually spreads, that other settlements get the same chance we did. Always planning the next battle. Someone has to. She stood and moved into his arms. But maybe we can celebrate this one first, just for tonight. Just for tonight, Rowan agreed. That night, the settlement threw a celebration, not for any specific occasion, just for the fact that they'd made it. That the impossible little settlement that wasn't supposed to survive had become something the Crown wanted to study. Lydia watched her students perform a play they'd written about the settlement's history. It was chaotic and poorly rehearsed and absolutely perfect. Sarah played Lydia, wearing a makeshift crown and declaring dramatically that she would teach everyone to read or die trying. I never said that, Lydia protested. You said it twice, Mrs. Chen informed her. Once during the fever and once during the attack, both times very dramatically. I was delirious. You were inspiring. After the play, people danced. Tom's father had gotten remarkably good at the fiddle. Couples spun through the square. Children ran wild. Rowan pulled Lydia into the dance, and she let herself be pulled. Let herself feel light and happy and hopeful. What are you thinking? He asked. That I'm glad you're a terrible judge of character. Excuse me? When we first married, you thought I was a schemer. You were completely wrong. If you'd been right, if you'd chosen someone competent at manipulation, none of this would exist. Rowan laughed. So you're saying my biggest mistake led to my greatest success? Exactly. I love you, he said. Simply. No drama, just truth. I love you too, even though you're dramatic and make terrible decisions. Those are your favorite things about me. They really are. They danced until the moon was high and the fires burned low, until children fell asleep in corners and adults drifted home to beds they'd built with their own hands. Lydia and Rowan walked back to their cottage, their home, and she felt something she'd never quite felt before. Complete. Not because a man had saved her, not because she'd been rescued from exile, but because she'd saved herself. Built something from nothing. Proven that the girl who'd been thrown away was actually someone worth believing in. And then, only then, she'd let herself love and be loved in return. A year after the wedding, Lydia stood in the settlement square with a letter in her hands. The Crown's expansion program was launching. 12 lords had agreed to adopt the Hale model. Whitmore had been promoted to oversee implementation, and they wanted Lydia to help train the new administrators. It's a lot of travel, she told Rowan. I'd be gone weeks at a time. Then I'll come with you. We'll make it work. Your duchy has capable people running it, people we've trained to think for themselves instead of waiting for orders. He took her hand. We built this. Now let's help others build their own versions. Sarah appeared at Lydia's elbow. She was taller now, healthier, more confident. Miss Lydia, the new students are asking when lessons start. New students? From Milford. Their parents heard about our school and want to send their children. Sarah beamed. We're getting famous. Lydia's throat tightened. Famous. A year ago, she'd been nothing. Now children were traveling to learn from her. Tell them lessons start tomorrow, same time as always. Sarah ran off. Lydia watched her go, this child she'd ridden through a blizzard to save, now healthy and whole and full of potential. That's why we do this, Rowan said quietly. For moments like that. I know. They stood together in the square they'd built. Around them, the settlement hummed with life. Homes rebuilt, families thriving, children learning, a community that worked because people had been given the chance to make it work. Mrs. Chen approached, looking uncharacteristically emotional. I'm retiring, she announced. What? No, you can't retire. You're the heart of this place. I'm old and tired, and I've trained 3 younger healers who are better than I ever was. She smiled. You don't need me anymore. That's how you know you've succeeded, when the thing you built can survive without you. We'll always need you. You'll always have me. I'm just stepping back to let others step up. Mrs. Chen gripped Lydia's hand. You did it, girl. You took nothing and made it everything. I'm proud of you. After she left, Lydia stood in the square and felt the weight of it all. The responsibility, the success, the future they were building. Are you okay? Rowan asked. I'm terrified, she admitted. What if we can't replicate this? What if the expansion fails? What if it works? Rowan turned her to face him. What if we actually change things? Make the frontier a place where people can thrive instead of just survive? That's a lot of pressure. Good thing you're excellent under pressure. Lydia laughed. Then she kissed him, her husband, her partner, the man who'd exiled her and then refused to leave. When they broke apart, she said, We should get started. The training program won't design itself. Tomorrow. Tonight we celebrate what we've built. We've celebrated every night this week. Then one more won't hurt. He pulled her back into the square, where someone had started music again. They danced among their people, because that's what they were now, their people. Not subjects to rule, but partners to build with. And Lydia thought about the girl she'd been, the terrified bride being cast out into winter. She'd thought her life was ending. She'd been wrong. It had been beginning. 5 years later, Lydia stood in the Crown's Great Hall, presenting the expansion program's results. 43 settlements now used the Hale model. Education rates across the frontier had tripled. Tax revenues were up while individual burdens were down. Crime had decreased by half. The Crown was impressed. Other nations were sending observers. But Lydia's favorite part was the letters. Dozens of them, from people whose lives had changed. Farmers who owned their own land now. Children who'd learned to read and were teaching others. Communities that had been dying and were now thriving. She read one aloud to the assembled lords. My daughter asked me yesterday what I wanted to be when I grew up. She's 6. She thinks anything is possible. That's because of you. Thank you for showing us we matter. The hall was silent, then applause. Not polite court applause, but genuine appreciation. Lydia stepped down from the podium and found Rowan waiting. You were brilliant, he said. I was adequate. You changed the world. That's better than adequate. They returned to Hale's Reach a week later. The settlement had grown, nearly 300 people now, with proper streets and a real marketplace, but it still felt like home. Sarah met them at the gate. She was 12 now, one of Lydia's teaching assistants. Miss Lydia, we have new students, 15 of them from the Western Territories. Their village heard about us and sent them to learn. Then we'll teach them. Also, Mara wants to know if she can start the advanced mathematics class. She says the regular lessons are too easy. Lydia smiled. Mara, who'd been one of her first students, who'd known nothing when they started, was now too advanced for standard teaching. Tell her yes, she can help design the curriculum. Sarah ran off, full of energy and purpose. Mrs. Chen appeared, leaning heavily on a cane now, but still sharp as ever. You're back. Good. The council needs you. There's a dispute about water rights in the southern section. I thought you were retired. I am. Doesn't mean I don't keep track of things. The old woman's eyes twinkled. Besides, someone has to make sure you don't work yourself to death. Again. Lydia laughed and let herself be pulled into the familiar chaos of settlement life. Disputes to mediate, lessons to plan, people to help. That night, she and Rowan sat on their porch, expanded twice now to accommodate the family they were planning, and watched the sunset. Do you ever think about that first night? Lydia asked. When you sent me here? Every day. Regret it? I regret how I did it. The cruelty, the assumptions, the waste. Rowan took her hand. But I can't regret where it led. To this, to us, to everything we've built. We took something terrible and made it beautiful. You took something terrible and made it beautiful. I just stopped being an idiot long enough to help. Lydia leaned against him. We make a good team. The best. In the distance, she could hear children playing, laughter and shouts and the sounds of a community at peace. She'd been exiled to die. Instead, she'd learned to live, and in learning to live, she'd taught others to do the same. It wasn't the life she'd imagined on her wedding night. It was better. Harder, messier, more complicated, but better. Because it was real. Built on truth instead of contracts, on choice instead of obligation, on love earned through fire and winter and refusing to break. What are you thinking? Rowan asked. Lydia smiled. That I'm glad you're a terrible duke. I'm an excellent duke. You're unconventional. Most dukes don't chop wood or live in frontier settlements or make their wives co-administrators. Most dukes are idiots. You're definitely an idiot. Your favorite idiot. My only idiot. He kissed her as the sun set over Hale's Reach. Over the settlement that wasn't supposed to exist. Over the future they'd built from exile and winter and sheer stubborn refusal to give up. And Lydia thought, this is what winning looks like. Not triumph without scars, not success without struggle, but survival transformed into something worth having. Pain turned into purpose. Exile becoming home. She'd been cast out as worthless. She'd proven them all wrong. And in doing so, she'd changed everything.